They couldn't take him, especially not on a cliff with no good places to run to or hide on. This wouldn't end well for them. He definitely should have run. It didn't make any sense not to. But it didn't make any sense that he was here either. It was like his legs started moving on their own. Midoriya wasn't sure what was going on, but here he was, stuck face to face with a real villain and he didn't even have Yamato after he threw it. Midoriya's eyes quickly scanned the scenery before finding the sword, discarded into the side. Midoriya pulled it to himself with the Beowulf gauntlets as the Nomus began to arrive, still screaming. Shit. Why had he been so stupid? Why couldn't he just run away and follow the plan? Wraith laid it out so clearly, if they wanted to live and join all for one all they had to do was run away. Why couldn't he do that? Kota stuttered and sniffed behind him, still sounding scared as he tried to process everything that was happening to him. The large man laughed in front of him, stretching his right arm as he prepared to throw another punch with casual ease. The Nomus circled around him on all sides, creating an inescapable mess as they trapped him inside. He understood why almost everyone was here, everyone except for one. Kota's hideout, the big guys invading, the Nomus wanted to kill him. All of that made sense. His problem and confusion were all with the last person here, himself. Why the fuck was he there? Chapter end notes. Yo Yagati eating children out of windows yo. This chapter took an eternity, which is probably why I don't edit these things. Just writing this took 7 hours because I had to rewatch the episodes and, even worse, reread this shitty fanfic called Ronin. Cringe. Speaking of cringe tilde. You can't just make references to chapter 4 and expect people to get it. Me, haha, everyone remembers chapter 4. Control plus circa control plus Vigo Burr. This wacky mess was fun to write even if it was a pain to edit, probably because I didn't want to edit it but thank God that I did. It was actual garbage before I went back and fixed some of it and it's still bad. That's amazing. So, because my creativity has long since dried up, I decided this scene would work pretty well in this fanfic if it paralleled the first real fight in this fanfic, rescuing Bakugo from the sludge villain. The concept behind rescuing someone who vehemently doesn't want you to rescue them along with the fact he's not supposed to be rescuing them seemed pretty applicable to this situation. But hey, this was definitely the most work I've put into a chapter and while it's definitely not great, here's hoping it's at least good. I'll probably come back to work on it some more in the future, but I don't think it's bad for what it had to accomplish. Namely because I think what it's trying to accomplish is the most forced part in this entire arc in canon, Midoriya trying to rescue Kota, but that's my personal bias again. I also briefly released this chapter, looked at it, realized I hated the ending and deleted the chapter so I could remake it because AO3 doesn't let you hide chapters, so if I didn't delete it everyone would look and see the original version. Sorry for anyone this happened to. Last note because it's what I've spent most of my time working on now, endings. Almost all of the hard parts for this chapter were because I had an end in mind and didn't plan how to get to it, exactly like I made fun of Horikoshi for. Horikoshi made the summer training camp just so Bakugo could get kidnapped without thinking about the details and planning it out properly and I made fun of it, but now here I am. Don't be like me. Don't just plan what things happen, plan how things happen. It'll help connect your world and give it a much better flow. Now, I'm done for a bit. I say a bit, but I'm going to get back on the horse and try to write a better chapter tomorrow. I guess we'll all see how I do then, huh. Chapter 144, of the end. Chapter summary. It's been a pleasure. Midoriya stood on the cliffside, completely clueless as to why he was there. He was surrounded by Nomus, face to face with a real villain, and stuck between that villain and some random unlucky child. But why the fuck was he there? Midoriya looked around, trying to find a way out of this mess but no dice. There were Nomus in every direction, even straight up as the flying Nomu hovered over everything. Even if he could just make a straight run out of here, Midoriya doubted the large man in front of him would allow it. The big guy was definitely over 6 feet tall, maybe around 6.5 feet tall. He wore a tank top, baggy pants, and combat boots, likely for the best mobility. The tank top stayed out of the way of his arms, the baggy pants gave him a lot of room to move his legs, and the boots should give good traction. Midoriya knew all that because his own outfit was designed with the exact same things in mind. A bodysuit to keep close to his body and stay out of his way while providing cover, baggy pants that held things while being loose enough that his legs could move a lot, and custom shoes that could grip a lot of surfaces while he parkoured. Midoriya finished taking in the sights and looked at what he had. Some grenades, a pair of pistols, and a whole bunch of weapons that were useless. If he just had a second to switch from Yamato to a more appropriate weapon but none of his other weapons would help either. What, are you trying to save him? Seriously, arriving out of nowhere just to help some brats definitely something a hero would do. The muscular man started laughing and showed off his quirk now. Midoriya had vaguely seen it from afar, but now he could actually tell what was happening up close. Muscle fibers sprouted from the man's skin, latching on and replicating the muscles underneath his skin to increase his strength to ludicrous levels. Your kind show up everywhere, talking about justice. Still, I've gotta admit it. I don't have a fucking clue who you are. The man laughed again as he raised a single hand, still not taking this seriously. If Midoriya could get in one good attack while this guy still wasn't paying attention, he could win. But did he have the will to actually kill someone? Still, I'm not picky and you seem pretty strong. This could be fun. He got into a real fighting pose, showing off his face in the moonlight. Bright hair, some shade of blonde probably, but the biggest detail was his left eye, specifically his lack of one. His left eye was a fake, meaning that they should lead their attacks in from that side. I'll make sure to torment you properly, so show me you blood. The large man went to leap forward, but Wraith had already taken the initiative and advanced. This opponent was fast, but they had a sword. Even with a ton of muscles simply couldn't block a regular sword let alone Yamato. They both lunged towards each other, the muscular man jumping through the air while Wraith dove underneath him, making the man strike the ground. While the man struck the wrong thing, Wraith turned, since he was still on the ground and expected this, and took the opportunity to go straight for the man's neck from behind. If he could sever this man's neck, they'd win. This was no time for morals, this was life or death. The moral debate of killing became irrelevant as their sword missed entirely, striking where the muscle guy had been just a moment prior. He dodged their sword strike by continuing to move forward, then spinning around to face them. What, went straight for the neck? Holy shit, you need to calm down. He laughed as he spread out his arms. Enjoy this a little, you don't often get to enjoy a fight like this. Oh, shit, I forgot why we're here. Wraith continued to advance with more sword strikes, carving through the air with lethal intent but unable to strike the opponent in a one-on-one setting. While they were going head to head, the muscular man was just too fast. He'd have to throw off the man's guard or attention to get a good hit in. We're supposed to be looking for some brat. Lot older than that shrimp though. The man stopped stepping back as he walked back into one of the Nomus who were watching the fight eagerly, not even glancing back as he grabbed the Nomu with one hand and hurled its entire body at Midoriya like he was throwing a brick. He had a casual air about him as he watched Midoriya dive out of the way of the flailing Nomu, continuing the conversation like they were having a walk through the park. Where's the kid called Bakugo? Wraith froze for just a second in complete confusion. Bakugo. Why on earth would anyone need to find him of all people, especially the League? Was this all an overly elaborate assassination plan? I still have to do my job if I want to keep killing, after all. Now the man dived forward without any Nomu, going in for another punch as his arm swung wide and easy in a clothesline, meant to hit him and send him flying backward. It was also an easy target for Yamato. This guy wasn't a Nomu, he couldn't regenerate. That meant they could pick at him and wear him down, starting with that arm. Wraith raised his sword after dodging the thrown Nomu and braced to take the arm in a head-on collision, leaning into the strike as he brought his sword down to sever the arm at the shoulder, then instead rolled forward as his opponent switched from a clothesline into a spinning kick in just a second, almost taking Wraith's head off in one hit. What happened to enjoying this, huh? Wraith rolled to his feet and stood, keeping the sword pointed at the muscular man as the giant laughed, clearly eager. The hell you talking about? I'm enjoying this shit out of this. And so you can talk. The man laughed as he fully turned, keeping a small gap between himself and Midoriya. Does that mean you don't know where that Bakugo kid is? I'm gonna say so. Who cares about that guy with all this fun right here? Alright then, let's play. The man's legs bulked up as he created more muscles underneath his pants, then jutted forward for a more serious attack. The man took to the air again, jumping through as he went for a kick against Midoriya. Wraith focused entirely on dodging now, jumping to the side and to the man's bad side with his missing eye so that the man couldn't see exactly what he was doing. Wraith couldn't counterattack though as the man was too fast, rushing past Wraith with his kick before hitting the ground and going for a second one in the time it would have taken Wraith to set up just one attack. You're fast. No blood yet, but this is still great. This is what I wanted. This is so fun. The man grinned like a demon as he picked up the pace, going faster and faster with the kicks. He seemed to be limiting himself as he barraged kicks from every direction, walking forward to close the distance while Wraith was entirely focused on dodging. But Wraith was starting to slip. The legs got closer and closer as he tried to keep dodging. Then one brushed his arm. Then the next clipped his coat. Finally one struck him in the body, sending him flying back into a Nomu. Why'd you run all the way here to save that brat, then all you do is run away? You're so weird. I love it. Save. Save what brat? Midoriya was just trying to stay alive right now, he didn't have time to save anyone. He barely had time to think. Midoriya was sent into a Nomu by Muscular's kick and used the opportunity to thin the herd a little bit, angling himself before he crashed into the Nomu and shoving Yamato through its skull as they hit each other. They keep pushing Yamato through the Nomu's skull as the two fell off the cliff and onto the level below. Wraith threw Yamato out of the Nomu before impact, otherwise they'd risk shattering the sword from falling, and kicked off the Nomu to negate a little bit of the fall before turning to face Muscular again and then kept on turning as he jumped backward to avoid Muscular's heel smashing straight through where he had been, the Nomu he'd fallen down with, and the ground below it all. The Nomu turned into a splatter on the ground in a second by a missed attack, its upper body completely gone. Muscular jumped back, his arm now caked red. Damn, you killed that fucker that quickly. Beating me to the punch. Wraith collected his feet under himself and got back into an orthodox guard as Muscular landed, but started to attack while Muscular talked. Muscular turned to face him right as the sword came in to chop off his throat. Muscular's arm seemed to flicker as he grabbed the dead Nomu's legs and slammed them into Midoriya's side, crushing Midoriya's attack and lobbing him into the cliff's wall with a strange crunch. That was probably one of Midoriya's ribs. See, this shit, I'm telling ya. You ain't like those pussies in the league. Now show me some blood. Midoriya rolled off the wall, his arm instinctively clawing at his dented side as the air rushed out of his lungs. That one hurt. His head was a little woozy, his legs felt heavy, but he wasn't done yet. He couldn't be. Right. He had to make it through this too. Do something. He couldn't remember what, he kind of had bigger things to deal with right now like that right straight aimed at their head. You're fast, dome head. Wraith deliberately fell down as Muscular punched, moving underneath the punch before rising to slash at Muscular's body while he was underneath Muscular's arm and out of sight. He could confirm a hit off of a missed attack, then. Muscular's knee clobbered Midoriya in the face. By ducking underneath the punch, Midoriya literally ran into the attack and was punished for trying to look into the future instead of focusing on the present. But Midoriya wasn't sure he could have done anything about that even if he was paying attention as he went flying backward again, slamming once more into the wall of the cliff as the world went hazy. Your quirk makes you pretty fast and pretty durable, but compared to me. Muscular monologued while approaching the slumped figure leaning against the cliff wall. It looked like the cliff was supporting him more than his own two legs. This was about over. Your quirk's just a worse version of mine. My quirk generates so many muscles they can't even be contained by my skin, making me way tougher, faster, and leagues stronger than you. What am I trying to say? Muscular walked over to the ragdoll lying limply against the cliff wall that tried to move, slowly putting its legs under itself before Muscular suddenly rushed in. I'm bragging. You understand what I'm saying. The figure in front of him took a few steps forward and wildly swung the blade, like swinging a baseball bat. Muscular jumped backward before he stepped back in and punted the guy several feet into the air while his word was out of the way. Right now, I can't help but laugh. You're rushing in to save somebody when you can't even save yourself. This shit's hilarious. The guy in the weird outfit flew through the air nicely. He was pretty light and got good height off of that, but it didn't feel right, that's why. The masked guy was thrown into the air and struck one of the watching freaks in the stomach, then sprung back to life as he grabbed the Nomu by the skull with one hand and rammed his fancy metal stick through one of its eyes, then jumped down while still holding the Nomu to bring it down with him. He then hurled the falling Nomu at Muscular, trying to set himself up for an attack. Muscular caught the falling and spasming Nomu by the skull, then glanced past it to look for his playmate suddenly twisting his entire body as a sword came out of his blind spot. Muscular threw the Nomu at his opponent as he foe sliced, watching in awe as the Nomu was cut in half with just a single cut. Damn, no wonder you're always fishing for those sword swings. Ya got some moves in you yet. But ya need to be honest with yourself. The masked figure pushed past the Nomu he cut in half, going in for another attack and missing by a wide margin as Muscular easily sidestepped him. Now that Muscular knew what the masked guy could do with his sword, he was gonna keep a closer eye on it. With that little trick out of the way, this fight was basically over. We both know it. The figure charged in as Muscular jumped back, grabbing another Nomu off the cliff by the leg and throwing it forward so fast it got whiplash. Can't. The Nomu flailed into the figure and got cut in half from the top of its head all the way to the pelvic bone. No regeneration in the world was saving that shit stain, but Muscular didn't care about those freaks. While that freak show got fucking wrecked, Muscular jumped right in after it. The figure's sword was out of position because he just cut a Nomu in half, meaning Muscular was free to attack. Muscular started by punching the masked guy once in the stomach since his arms were out of the way. Muscular's fist hit right in the solar plexus, knocking the air out of his prey and setting up his next attack. The figure stumbled back, now out of breath and confused as he swiped wildly with his sword and proved Muscular right. He missed by a mile as Muscular stepped around him, getting behind the masked figure and grabbing him by the head. The figure flailed for a second, trying to swing and hit Muscular in the arm with his sword, but Muscular attacked too quickly. Muscular swept the masked man's legs out from under him and stepped forward, slamming him headfirst into the ground with enough force to shatter rocks. There was a cracking sound as he finally broke that black mask, and Muscular smiled as he let go of the man's head and admired his work. Beneath him the figure lay, his sword arm going limp as he spaced out. Muscular could really smell the blood, really get into it now. I told you, you're too slow to hit me. Seriously, what a fucking joke. Muscular walked over and punted the guy in the ribs, flipping him over as he laughed. Seriously, was that all you had, hero? PNK. Everything hurt. He hadn't felt like this in a long time. He felt like shit. Everything felt like shit. Where was he? He was looking up and seeing stars, so did that mean he was? He must be at school. Bakugo and his friends must have beaten him up again. He grunted in pain and agitation as someone shouted over him. They were so loud and laughing. He just wanted to go to sleep. All you had, hero. PNK. Hero. Midoriya's eyes peered open again, struggling against his body to look and terrified that they bothered to. Someone terrifying was standing over him, a huge guy with weird muscles on the outside. A- and beyond that guy were monsters. Giant monsters. He'd seen those monsters before. Somewhere. It didn't matter. His head hurt too much, he didn't want to think anymore. Water hose. Water what now? He leaned back against the ground, feeling a weird object in his hand. He was holding a weird stick thing. Papa, Mama, someone was talking again. They sounded young. He could barely see them standing on the cliff above. That kid looked sad as he stood there, shouting, but he looked pretty brave as he was surrounded by monsters and still shouting. Did you torment them like that, too, before you killed them? Killed? Who killed? His head was swimming as he tried to think. Huh, seriously, your parents were heroes. The big guy turned away from him and started to approach the kid as he spoke. Your parents swah. Everything faded out to be replaced by a high-pitched pinging noise as his ears rang before coming back into focus. Who them that my left eye is an artificial eye now. He started to get his bearings again as he tried to breath and instead spit up blood. He coughed, wriggling as the blood stuck to his face. What was going on? He was wearing some stupid outfit that stuck to him, and there was something covering his head and eyes. His helmet was broken, and there were definitely a few shards of something in his face. It really hurt. It's your fault. It's because of guys like you. The kid was back. He looked up again, straining to see that kid on the cliffs who was talking. That it always turns out like this. Turned out like what? He was so confused now. He just wanted to close his eyes and pass out. He'd gone through all of middle school and he turned out fine. Wait. Wasn't he done with middle school? Kids are always shifting the blame like that, that's no good. The big muscular guy spoke up to Kota, getting closer to the cliff and further from him. It's not like I've got a grudge about this eye or anything, you know. I just wanted to kill and those two wanted to stop me. The large muscular man spread his quirk over his entire body as the Nomus began to lean back, aware of what was about to happen without the large man saying anything to them. It was the result of all of us doing what we wanted. What's wrong is wanting to do something you're unable to do, like your mommy and dad. The white fog that had begun to fill the air spread up the cliff as the man held down a button on Yamato. He didn't bother speaking as his thumb moved a little, switching which quirk was active as the white fog began to cling to everything. The wind carried it up and away from the man's body, keeping him safe as he clicked the button just before the cloud reached the small child crying on the cliffs above. The result was almost instant as the Nomus began to scream, being shredded to pieces by the slash dimension of what was practically a dead man lying on the floor. He waited a good second to get up after the fog cleared, looking around. It was messy. Lot of blood on the cliff. The Nomus that had been on the same level as him were eviscerated, having not reacted in time. The Nomus left were the ones on the cliff above, having stayed to watch the spectacle of the man getting beaten to death from a distance. It looked like it paid off in the end for them. The man felt the wind blow through his helmet and onto his face as he slowly lifted Yamato to look at it one last time as everyone tried to process what just happened. He only got this far because of it. It had managed to kill 5 more Nomus in a single hit with the right setup in just 5 seconds of prep time. Kota was the first to react, amazed. He ran to the edge and slid down, with the cliff face now scarred and partially destroyed by his attack. You. Quote ... Kota, go. The monster and the man both knew what happened with a small smile, pointing to the main building. Run. You did it. You got him. Kota ran up next to him, ignoring his words and the monsters who were left standing. Kota didn't notice. Of course he didn't, he was just a kid. You really got him. Quote ... Kota, get going now. He wasn't mad as he came to. He figured Kota wouldn't be able to, but he had to try. Just get going. Try to get back to the main building. They're waiting for you. Come on, get up. Those monsters are going to move any second now. Kota glared at the Nomu and tried to pull him up, but he lightly pushed the boy away. Stop telling me to run. We can get away now. No Kota, you don't understand. Midoriya was still lying on his back, fully aware of the path he put himself on now as he watched the sky, trying to conserve energy and just keep breathing. You need to go. Run. Get to the camp, quickly. But why? Get up. They're going to move soon. The Nomus aren't going to move, Kota, because something was finally coming back down after moving out of the way, having jumped with so much force and speed that he accidentally launched himself too far into the air. From his vantage Midoriya saw it coming clear as day, which was why he grabbed Kota with strength he didn't have and lobbed the child off the cliff to the next level below, just to buy the kid a few seconds longer to live. Quote ... I missed. Muscular landed like a thunderbolt, shattering the ground with an enormous smile. He had coated himself with muscle when he noticed the strange white substance sticking to his boots and launched himself into the air to escape the attack, and it was a good thing he did. The final cliff was caked with blood from those freaky fuckers he brought along. That attack really was something, but it's so obvious once you figure it out. If you touch the white shit, you get cut. That's why your sword's so sharp, right? The masked figure rolled over and forced his way up, crouching more than standing as he clung to his sword. Silver and brown hair now flowed out from under the mask and he could see cloth over where his opponent's eyes were. That was a good attack, damn good attack. Thought you were dead but you keep on pulling out more surprises. Now I'm pissed that I didn't take you seriously. This guy really wanted to save the kid. How many of the Nomus were dead from this one guy? How many league members? Fuck if he cared. This was the best. Now I've got to keep going. Come on, come on. Playtime's over. I want to see what you're made of. All of a sudden I want to tear you apart. And that means first, Muscular zoomed forward like he was going to attack the shrimp and sure enough, his opponent moved to try and stop him. Instead of going for the kid though, Muscular stopped dead right in front of Midoriya, coating his arm in muscle and throwing a single punch. Crrrang. Muscular's fist hit the sword with so much force that the blade cracked right there, bending on the spot as Muscular launched that fucker with his first hit. All your attacks start with that sword. Wah bam. The next punch walloped his opponent and sent him flying straight to his precious little sword. Without it, you can't do shit. Muscular seemed to teleport as he used his quirk fully again, appearing above where the figure was and grabbing him by the neck. He lobbed the figure through a tree then grabbed the tree and threw it towards the figure too. Yes, yes, come on. He ran forward as the figure lurched out of the way of the tree, still standing. Yes. Muscular's arm grew in size as he prepared his final attack, forming a fist as he approached. Scream. Beg. Show. Me. Kota. Mao. Kaminari. He looked up last time at the giant approaching. He was barely able to even stand anymore. His legs teetered as he closed his eyes, smiling sadly. Quote. Mom, I'm so sore. Chapter 145, What I Want. Chapter summary. A few scattered thoughts being put together as everything falls apart. He didn't feel anything. No, that wasn't right. He couldn't feel anything. It was like his entire body was made of lead. He couldn't see, couldn't hear, and could barely even think. Was he thinking? He was at the camp. Then. Yamato. Where was Yamato? His eyes slowly opened as feeling began to return. There was something wet covering his right eye, dripping down his head. It was red and obscured his vision, making it difficult to see. He was laying against something. The world was spinning. Everything was dark. Kota. Where was Kota? Midoriya groaned, then made the mistake of breathing. His lungs felt like they were filled with ice and there was a stabbing sensation as he tried to breathe, racking his body with pain. Yes, now he could start to feel again. His entire body was in agony now, mangled and laying against a broken tree like a discarded doll. He couldn't even lift his head, let alone get up. The warmth was starting to leave his body. His heartbeats felt agonizing like there was a knife in his heart. Everything was pain. Midoriya blearily looked past the blood dripping down his face. Muscular punched him. That's what happened. In front of him, Midoriya could roughly see the path his body took after being punched by following the trail of snapped branches. The punch didn't send him flying far, but it didn't need to. It did its job. He could see someone laughing in the distance, moving in slow motion. That was him. Muscular. He was still laughing. How long ago did he get punched? Every second felt like an eternity, trapped within his own body and barely able to move without putting himself into agony as Muscular slowly and confidently walked over in what seemed to be slow motion. Midoriya leaned back, just trying to focus on breathing. It was extremely painful, and every new body part he regained feeling of was a new thing to add to the pain. That last punch definitely overpowered the muscle suit's energy absorption, and then he went flying through everything and crashed here. That was the order of events as he could put it together. In the distance, Kota was crying and screaming. He didn't even try to run, damn brat. The kid probably didn't even remember the Nomus everywhere. They were only staying still because Muscular wanted to kill both of them himself, to ensure that they couldn't get away. Kota didn't stand a chance, did he? Yamato. Where was Yamato? Midoriya slowly pried himself up and managed to move his neck, getting some real movement finally. He could see the sword just a little ways away. Muscular really did live up to his promise of sending him right after his sword. The sword had a bend in the middle where it was punched. Not a huge bend, probably just 10 or 20 degrees, but that still ruined the sword and he still wasn't even talking about the new cracks in it. He'd have to reforge the whole thing. No, he wouldn't get the chance. Midoriya's chest wasn't feeling any better as he slumped, trying to focus past the incredible pain in his chest. He needed to get up, he needed to do something. Why had he been so stupid as to go back and try to fight? All he had to do was leave Kota, now they both were going to die. Oh, I wouldn't know about that if I were you. It had a sing-songy and young voice as someone looked down at him, smiling. KK, ooh, da. Nope, good try though. A small child sat above him, having just appeared from seemingly thin air. He wore a jacket a few sizes too big and baggy pants. His hair was long and shaggy, spoofing out in every direction while his face was vague blur beneath the mess. Somehow though, Midoriya could tell the boy was smiling despite seeing no mouth. Good try on all of this, really. You tried. The child definitely Kota or one of the students, so that meant it was probably with the league. Right. Midoriya connected enough thoughts to look around and really take in the scenery. The night sky that seemed to be growing darker by the moment, the strangely hushed sound of the leaves rusting and Muscular laughing, and his own strained breathing. It all seemed to move in slow motion, likely the effect of some sort of quirk. Nope. Good try again. The child lay in the grass next to him. Midoriya didn't know how he knew where the child was when he couldn't even turn his head to check, but it was just a feeling he got, like knowing where your arm was without looking. Keep going. You're smart, and you're almost done. The pain he just went through. Did he have head trauma? Midoriya really started to take in the blood running down his face as he accepted that he probably had at least a little head trauma. No, not a little. The strange pain as he tried breathing, the dimness in his eyes, the pounding in his ears. Opening parenthesis. I'm dying. Yeah, the child nodded without entering Midoriya's line of sight, smiling sadly. He knew what the child was doing without looking, and just like his looming death, it was starting to come together. You're not real. Yeah, again the child nodded before sitting up, telling Midoriya what he already knew. If you're lucky you have a punctured lung, that takes an hour or so to kill. If you're not, ripped through the heart, will kill me in 3 to 5 minutes. He was talking, but his mouth wasn't moving. He knew what the child was doing without looking. He was probably in a hallucinatory state from being so close to death. I'll lose consciousness sometime during the next minute, probably in 10 seconds. Probably. You're fucked. Every way to Sunday. The kid didn't pull punches as they lay there, quietly watching the world go black. The first brain function to go would be vision. And then, he couldn't remember. Should have paid a little more attention when he was researching first aid, but the kid made it clear how little the what-ifs mattered. Even if there weren't any villains, no one here could save you from a rib through the heart. At least it's stuck in, you'd be dead way faster if the rib fell out. Thanks. Yeah, if he got stabbed in the heart. He was already dead. No one on site could save him, emergency services were too far away, and that wasn't even accounting for all the villains. Out of all the people who'd die here, to something as stupid as a camp attack, he really didn't think he'd be one of them. Especially not the first. He blamed the Nomus. There were way too many of them and all the heroes on site were way too weak to deal with even one. The only hope the rest had for a Nomu was Pixie Bob, who got one shot like a bitch. One blow to the head and she was out like a light. Meanwhile, here he was, reminiscing before he died with some kid he hallucinated. Who was? Ya no, really thought you would have hallucinated Wraith. The monster was the first you made, the man is the closest to your ideals, and yet. It leaned up, flashing a smile. Ya got me tilde. Opening parenthesis ... I can't even die in peace. The world was getting noticeably dimmer except for the few parts of the kid he could see, but that was probably just because of how dark it was. He no longer had the night vision built into his mask since that broke, blood was getting into his right eye, and to top it all off he was still wearing Ken's bandana. He was gonna die as he lived, looking like a fucking idiot. It wasn't even sad, it was just funny how pathetic he went out. But while sight was one of the first functions to be lost, it was unlikely that he lost it so quickly if Muscular was still walking over in this strange slow-motion world. Time seemed to be at a standstill now. Maybe he really did have a quirk and it only activated way too fucking late. Wouldn't that be ironic? He had a quirk the whole time, he could stop time by killing himself. Actually, that was still more useful than some quirks, it was just useful only once and then never again. He could see various moments throughout his life. Most of them were recent. Fighting Mao, meeting Eiko, playing golf with his mom. Wait, what was this? Was his brain making his own depressing death scene for him? The brain replays moments from its past in desperate situations, to try and find a way to survive. My life flashing before my eyes. It's just a survival mechanism. Midoriya smiled grimly, at least, he tried to. His body control wasn't very good right now, especially with the pain making him tense up. That's why I know how long I have to live, it pulled up the memory of my first aid training. But that doesn't explain who you are, or why you're here. Just to talk. Just to remind us of some things before we go. Just to make us think. The child sat on a rock next to him, smiling as it stared down despite not having a mouth. Man, I'm even a pain in my own ass. Midoriya's gaze slowly tilted upward as his eyes lost focus. Can't kill. Can't follow a plan. I can't even just run. He grit his teeth at that annoying memory. He would have lived if he didn't run towards Koda, he would have lived if he stayed with the group and didn't try to even find Koda, and he certainly would have lived if he just accepted all for one's offer way back whenever that was and never came to this shitty camp. Everything that got him here was his own indecision, his own mistake. If he'd just made a snap decision earlier and stuck with it, he'd be fine now. It was shit. Heroes were shit. They already knew that, and yet, here you are. Coming out to this camp which definitely should have been a trap, trying to teach kids to be their very best and make your future job a lot harder, and to one up all of that, trying to take on a whole bunch of Nomus and a real villain for some kid who thinks you're full of shit. The problem with talking to someone who was in your head was that they always knew what you were thinking. So his last moments weren't going to be peaceful, but annoyed and disgruntled. He didn't even get to say goodbye to his mom. So this was how she found out about the vigilante stuff. Man, he was an asshole. If he could do it all again. No. I'd do it. Again. His mouth hurt to move, probably because he bit his cheek or something, but he was definitely being a dick. For some reason, he knew if he had the chance, he'd do it all again. If he could stand, if he could run, he'd get right back up again and charge. But while he knew that he would do it all again in a heartbeat, he didn't know why. Why did you do it? The child was looking directly at him again. Midoriya could feel the gaze on his face and managed to shift, instead catching sight of the massive man as he walked over slowly and looked at Midoriya. Why would you do it? Midoriya didn't answer. He instead focused his eyes on the large person who strode towards him, laughing all the while. It looked like his number was punched. Muscular was probably going to stomp on his head and kill him now. He didn't even get to pass out before dying and miss some of the pain. This was going to hurt. So, since he had nothing to do, he went with his memories as he thought over everything, reminiscing on the past. Why did he rush over to Koda, when every fact in the world told him he should just run away? Why did he come to this shitty camp, even though he already knew UA was a waste of time? Why didn't he join with One for All immediately when offered the chance of a lifetime, to get on the same level as Mao or Kurogiri? There was no reason to it. No logic behind it. It didn't make sense because it couldn't ever make sense. Thinking about why he did things the way he did, there was only one good explanation other than he was crazy. Opening parenthesis ... I wanted to. Opening parenthesis ... I didn't want to join All for One. But why? Opening parenthesis ... I wanted to come to this camp. But why? I wanted to go fight those Nomus and Muscular. But why? Midoriya stared eye to eye with Muscular, completely baffled and back to square one. But why wouldn't I want to be successful and join All for One? Why did I want to come to the middle of bumping nowhere and teach some fakes? Why the fuck was I stupid enough to want to fight him? Midoriya stared up in a mixture of confusion and horror at the massive imposing figure of the villain approaching, fully covered in muscles larger than Midoriya's body. In a single hit, that man had done more damage to Midoriya than all the Nomus Midoriya had ever accomplished across his entire career. Fuck, that villain had done more in one punch than Maruko or Gangork ever did when Midoriya fought them. Why in the flying fuck did he want to fight that guy? He'd seen a few of his moves in advance and even Wraith didn't think they could take them. He was too fast for their teleportation, too strong for their body armor, and all of that was before the Muscular guy got serious. Even the idea of trying to fight Muscular seemed idiotic to him now, but he just got crushed by him. Literally. Midoriya would have laughed, but he both didn't have the energy and didn't want to push the rib into his heart anymore. He should have wanted to peacefully slide away instead of feeling all this shit. But he didn't. But now he was really trying to think, to figure out why he'd done all that stupid shit. He wanted to know why, even when he should be so sorry to his family, he was so sure he'd rush back in again even against that monster of a villain. Why wasn't he wanting to just die painlessly? Why did he want to get his legs underneath him one last time? It was pointless. He was already dying, and no one could save him. Kota's not, though. Kota was still not running, standing just a little ways away and screaming his head off while throwing something at the villain. Stupid kid couldn't even run away right. Wasn't that like him? Midoriya couldn't run away correctly either, and the fact that he was lying there with his ribs broken and his heart bleeding was proof. Midoriya's flashback ran through it all again. They'd both been alone. They'd both been scared. They both didn't like this harrowing world anymore. Did that mean he stayed because he wanted to help someone who was like him, just because they were similar? Because he could see himself in Kota? No, it couldn't have been, otherwise what was the point of saving Bakugo? Muscular was starting to fully focus on Kota, turning to face him now that the kid got his attention. Was he just going to lie back and watch? Why did he bother to train Kaminari, some kid he met by accident? Why'd he go out of his way and spend a whole week with the kid to train him? Midoriya took a deep breath in and powered through the pain, spitting blood as his eyes came into focus. Why did he bother to come out to this camp and try to create heroes to beat him? Why did he go on a tirade of defeating Yakuza for an entire week non-stop? The child laughed, seeming to fade into the background as his face became distinct. Midoriya barely noticed though as he put some strength in his arms. He wasn't done, not yet. He had one last thing he had to do. Why the fuck did he decide to dress up like a dumbass and parade the streets? What made him decide to keep going, 1 year ago, when he got into his first real fight? Why was he the Ronin? Midoriya leaned forward, trying to pull himself up with sheer determination before lurching backward as his muscles gave in before rising again through the muscle suit, forcing himself to get out of the dirt and get up. He just needed to get up one more time. Heroism's like a bad punchline these days, but it's time for our curtain call anyway, so what do you say? The muscle suit did most of the work for Midoriya's failing body as he lurched upright, forcing himself through the pain to get up. One strike. He just needed to stay alive long enough for one last strike. One last joke for the road. The mystery smiled as he faded away, confident. Not all dreams could be attained, but that didn't mean they weren't worth pursuing. Quote. I think you've got your answer now, Izuku. Why did he do it? Why did he do anything? Because he wanted to, that's why. And what did he want? He wanted to fight. He wanted to help people. He wanted to save people. He wanted to be a hero. Chapter 146, The Last Joke. Chapter Summary. There will be bloodshed. The man in the mirror nods his head. The only one left will ride upon the dragon's back because the mountains don't give back what they take. Oh, there will be bloodshed, it's the only thing I know is real. Tilda the only thing I know is real. As the dust settled and debris cleared, Muscular took a step back to look at his handiwork. One punch and the whole show was done already. Little disappointing, but he didn't think they'd get this far. He hadn't gotten serious in a long time, a real long time. Muscular smiled as he walked through the woods to check out his latest victim, uprooting and breaking trees in his way with a backhand as he came forward. The masked figure was falling apart after that one. His mask was shattered, he was stuck in the ground, and blood dripped from his body. Muscular's smile got bigger as he smelled the blood, his eye taking in such a beautiful sight. He loved it when people started to break like this, but he needed more. What, was that all you had? Muscular laughed as he picked up a tree, smiling from ear to ear while staring down the figure. His eyes were bleary and unfocused and fading fast. Muscular flexed his hand, shattering the tree with his grip strength. Some cheap tricks and a fancy sword. You're done already? The only response was a slight shift as the figure slumped over more. He was already dead probably. Their time together had been fun, but all good things had to come to an end. Muscular laughed again, disregarding safety as he tossed the pieces of the tree to the side and went in to crush the guy's head with a boot, finally getting close and personal with his toy. If that guy was alive enough for a counterattack, Muscular kind of wanted to see it. He strode over and pulled back his boot as something hit his back. It had practically no force behind it and slid right off his muscles, but it stopped him for a second as he tried to figure out what just happened. Water. What the fuck? Street. Stop it. A kid was standing behind Muscular, with both arms extended towards the large villain. His expression was something fierce and angry, but his legs were shaking. Now that was good spirit, real good spirit. He liked this punk. Muscular stared at him for a whopping 5 seconds before he burst out into laughter. Holy shit, I totally forgot about you. My bad kid. Muscular touched his prosthetic eye, changing it out as he spoke casually. I thought you'd at least try to run or something, but seriously. You're still right here. What, you miss your parents that much? Shut up, shut up. The kid was crying harder now as he raised his hands like he was gonna try to fight with that weak-ass quirk of his. Muscular fit his new eye in, making sure it was a stable connection while he had a minute. This was pretty much all done already. Well, since I've got a spare second, Muscular checked the time. He'd get started combing through the camp in a few seconds, but first. His body didn't bulk up to its full size this time cause it didn't need to. He was going for another one-hit kill, just like the one he used on this brat's parents. His fist would crush the kid's body, leaving him to die slowly and painfully and give Muscular another beautiful sight. His legs bent as he prepared to jump forward. Here, let me send ya to him. Bam. Something ricocheted off the back of Muscular's head and made him stop, nearly falling off balance as he took a second to think about what just happened. Something just hit him in the back of the head. What? The old mask bounced off of Muscular's head before rolling to a stop. He slowly turned, first taking in the mask, then his eyes flicked further back into the forward towards the shambling shape. The corpse swayed with every step as he walked forward, barely conscious anymore as he activated Beowulf's pull function and plucked Yamato from the ground. The bend wasn't that bad, but the cracks were pretty serious. Whoever found this thing was going to have a hell of a time trying not to break it if he didn't beat them to the punch. Holy shit, are you for real? Muscular smiled widely as he pivoted his entire body to face his opponent, spreading his arms as he laughed. You're still standing. Holy shit. Quote. Blood swelled in his mouth as he tried to speak, having to cut himself off to spit it out. He clumsily tried to sheath Yamato, planting his feet as he shifted into position. The world was spinning. His body felt clammy. Irrelevant. Focus. Quote. Kota, run, now. Midoriya found his grounding as he continued to move forward and shoved Yamato into the sheath, the blade scraping on the inside of the sheath from its bend. He clawed at the bandana over his eyes, ripping it off as he lurched again. You still care about that shit? Seriously. Muscular laughed as he prepared to launch another attack. The Nomus came forward to watch, seeming excited. They wouldn't do anything without orders, so all he had to do was kill Muscular and Kota would be safe. He just needed to get one hit. One last strike. He could endure until that moment. Still caring about all this hero bullshit when you're about to die. You're a funny guy. Quote. Kota. Midoriya didn't have a lot of time or a lot of air left. His grasp on reality was slipping. He could barely stand and his whole body felt stiff. This speech was going to be short. Quote. I can't help you. What? The young boy was confused, but Midoriya was just being honest. He staggered forward, gauging the distance through tired eyes. His body wasn't going to make it. He'd have to rely on the muscle suit and luck for this. He just needed to keep his grip. As long as he could hold Yamato he could win. You've got issues. A lot, and I can't save you from them. I can't be your hero. Blood dripped down his face as he spoke, coming to a standstill. He stopped walking not because he wanted to, but because his legs refused to take 2 more steps and he needed to save the last one. All I can do is fight. So, get out. Izuku leaned forward, smiling now to try and hide the fear he was feeling. He was getting cold. He was getting really cold. I can't be your hero, but I can keep you alive just a little longer. His hair was ruffled by the wind and his blood shone in the moonlight as his eyes locked with Muscular. They were both smiling now while Kota looked absolutely terrified, staring Midoriya dead on. Gee, Jim guy. I don't know why your parents left you here. I don't know if they cared about you. But you're gonna have KGHLR. You're gonna find out yourself. Izuku's grin spread as far as it could as he tried to remember what all might look like when he was being confident, ignoring the blood that dripped from his mouth. You're gonna have to save yourself. Be your own hero. Even though you don't know anything. Kota was so confused, trying to figure out what was happening. He had a lot of questions, but Midoriya didn't have time. He could feel his heart slowing down as the beats became more irregular. It was time to go. Even though you don't know anything, why are doing so much? Does it really matter? Izuku smiled at Kota, shifting his attention for just a second. Get going, kid. You've got a lot of work ahead. Alright, I'll take it from here. Go. Kota didn't respond, just staring him down as took one step. Then another. Then one last step before he went into a proper sprint, rushing past Izuku with his eyes shut tight to try and hide his tears. Izuku interposed himself between Kota's retreating figure and Muscular, swaying slightly before standing back up and raising his guard again. Muscular had been about to charge Kota and stopped for a second, laughing. What, do I have to go through you again to get the kid? Thing like that. He was tired, he was so tired. His body didn't want to keep going, but he needed to. Just a few more seconds. What, are you gonna try to be a hero? You're nearly dead on your feet. What kind of hero shit can you do now? Show me. Muscular had noticed that Izuku was held together by string and prayers it seemed, but it was unlikely that the villain realized how bad it was. Just adjusting his position a bit had tired out Izuku, and the real world was starting to fade. He was so cold, why was everything so cold? Heroism isn't an AC, Tion. Izuku leaned forward semi-intentionally, taking his eyes off Muscular as his left hand slipped around Yamato's saya, gripping the handle. He just needed to pull the trigger, he just needed to stay awake for one last attack. He'd done it thousands of times before, so it was time to see if that practice paid off. Come on, show me what you've got. Muscular wasn't one to let his opponents die off on their own, so instead of just waiting a little longer for Izuku to keel over, he took the initiative and charged in. His pants and boots had been damaged earlier by the slash dimension and now were completely destroyed by his own quirk as the muscle built up. He leaned forward like a shark and launched himself through the air, aiming to punch straight through Izuku with a punch and still have enough momentum to kill Kota in the same hit. Quote. It's a mind set. Izuku's gaze hardened as he forced himself straight into the attack, steeling himself as he pulled the trigger and let Yamato fly. Chapter 147, Drawing Cut. Muscular sailed through the air straight towards Izuku with enough force to shatter the smaller boy, his presence dominating everything as his body shattered trees on impact. He seemed to blot out the entire sky as he flew, laughing menacingly and maniacally as he closed in for the kill. Izuku kept his eyes locked onto Muscular, waiting for the very last moment to attack. Yamato didn't have much reach, so he'd have to wait until the last second and then. He took his final step forward as he lined up Yamato, pushing off his left foot while driving his right forward and down to lean into the attack. His shoulders twisted to pull the sword as far as possible, giving the most chance of Yamato hitting his opponent possible. His left arm tugged back on the sheath, pulling it back and out of the way to get Yamato free as soon as possible. His eyes were locked on Muscular, putting all the strength he had into his hands. He just had to hang on. He just had to endure a little longer. Just stay awake, stay focused. And then, he pulled the trigger. Yamato had been through a lot. Not only in these recent fights, but Yamato had also always been Midoriya's first weapon in almost any situation. It had taken many beatings throughout its career. It had been dropped a few times, it had clashed with Stain and Kaminari's swords, and it had taken an especially bad beating tonight. One of the worst forces on it though was the gunshot draw. By firing a bullet into the handle the sword could be drawn at ludicrous speed, but it put a lot of force on both the handguard that was hit and the blade it was attached to as it forced the sword out. Normally, the blade just shook a little while it was being drawn. It was fine since there was no major damage yet. But that was before it had taken Muscular's demolishing punches. Yamato was already activated and at full power by the time Izuku pulled the trigger, pre-firing smoke into the sheath to give itself the best chance of hitting Muscular possible. He risked cutting through the sheath in his hand, but that didn't matter in his mind. He was already a lost cause, and that was before things started to go sideways. He pulled the trigger and launched a single bullet into the handguard, sending a large amount of force through the sword and fracturing the already damaged blade. The cracks grew as the blade shattered into dozens if not hundreds of charged pieces of metal, cutting straight through everything they came in contact with. Like the rest of the ammunition. The fragments of Yamato were launched forward and clipped through the sheath, hitting the live rounds of ammunition used for the explosive drawing cut and punching straight through the shell and into the gunpowder, creating small explosions as they sailed away. Other shards went into Izuku and the items he had on his person like the grenades, causing them to prematurely detonate by slicing through the casings and straight into explosives. The flashbang and smoke grenades didn't do much as they exploded, adding to the chaos and carnage as Izuku's coat was torn through, but those weren't the only types of grenades he had on his person. The final type, the explosive grenades the beast had stolen, detonated prematurely launching fire and fog and metal shards forward. The bodysuit served one final usage as it weathered most of the explosions, lending its muscles one last time as the wind of destruction swept everything in front of them, propelled by the ignition of the grenades. Yamato's fog bled together with the smoke grenades and the multiple strings of explosions were mixed with the flashbangs, ringing sounds and flashing lights as Yamato's fog spread across the ground and trees. Spikes of pain as metal fragments pierced straight through the bodysuit, burning pain as the explosion scorched his unprotected face and the new wounds the metal fragments created, nausea and confusion as his senses were overwhelmed by the explosion. All of it didn't matter. Izuku could barely feel anymore as he concentrated everything he had on his final attack, gritting his teeth so hard they began to crack as he brought whatever was left of Yamato out and cut through the air. He poured everything he had into this attack, taking the explosion that rocked him backward like a stone as he forced his feet into the ground to anchor himself. Izuku couldn't see a damn thing as he cut through the air with Yamato, holding down the power to full blast as the fog spread like wildfire. The wind and explosion pushed it back towards the cliff, coating everything in its way with a series of portals as they dug straight through whatever they touched. For a moment, the scene lit up as the smoke that connected the Yamato fragments continued to spread the current charge. It illuminated the night with bright blue light for just an instant. But it was time to say goodbye. For a brief moment across the camp, it seemed like there were two fires as two massive blue lights illuminated the forest. While the first was obviously the forest fire the villains caused, it was difficult to tell what the second one was as it started with a loud bang and spread rapidly, coating the forest before everything started to sink into the ground like it was an ocean, falling through the thousands of portals that now covered a section of the forest. Falling through the portals on its own did no real harm to anything at first, until the portals all suddenly shut at once and chopped anything stuck between the gateways to bits. Some things were trapped between portals in the cold dimension, completely removed from this side of the world. Others just fell to pieces and seemed to implode as the forest and half of the cliff collapsed to the ground, unable to support themselves with tons of small pieces torn from the hole. The worst part was right where the portal started, right at Izuku's feet. The ground had been torn apart as if there was an earthquake, causing a few crevices and cracks as the dirt tried to fill in for the new missing chunks. The Nomus were barely recognizable. The ground wasn't as destroyed near them, but they were still partially buried and cut to ribbons. Only two had managed to avoid getting their brains cut lethally, and even they didn't look great as their regeneration was pushed to the limit to try and reform their body after the Swiss cheese they had been turned into. Muscular was literally gone. There was something wet and meaty that hit Izuku partway through the drawing cut and, if he had the brain power to spare, he'd guess that was most of what was left of the villain. The large criminal had been the second closest when the explosion started and directly in the path Yamato's fog was pushed by the series of explosions. He was probably mostly in chunks in the cold world now. Hell, there was a chance he wasn't even dead and just got stuck on the other side. A grim thought, but Izuku didn't have very many thoughts as he stood still as a statue, sword still extended as his body froze. The muscle suit alone held him in place as his consciousness began to fade in and out. Cold. Everything was cold. Why was it so cold? Hot. His face, his hand he burned. Why was it so hot? Izuku glanced down with unstable eyes. His face was in agony, but his eye could still make out his hand or what was left of it. He didn't know why things started exploding, but whatever the cause, one of the effects was his hand. His left hand, the one that had been on the sheath, was just a thumb and some stubs that were bleeding profusely. He should have been in immense pain. He should have been screaming. But he just wasn't. He was too tired. He tried to close his eyes but found that he couldn't, tried to open his mouth but it wouldn't. There was a flash and... Ha, ha, ha. Izuku began to lose strength as his brain slowed down again. He tried to blink again but he couldn't. His face was so hot. It felt weird. The explosion. He damaged his face. Probably did something stupid like blow his eyelids off. He couldn't see through his right eye anymore. Not because of blood, he just couldn't see anything anymore. He didn't notice at first, he'd been too focused on the attack. Izuku's failing body caught up with his mind as gravity kicked in and his right leg gave out, leaving him to plummet face first into the ground. There was dirt in his eyes and he couldn't blink. His mouth hurt to move. Everything was in pain. His arm probably protected his head from blowing up when the explosions went off. It would have been under his head to draw the sword, so if there was an explosion under his ribs, the arm would absorb most of it. That didn't matter. Izuku strained his arm up, dropping Yamato as his fingers raked through the dirt, trying to lift him up one last time so he could see. Was he done? D-I-G-E. Yeah, kid, you got him. He really was in deep now. He could see Wraith with his blind eye, standing over him and looking at his work. The carnage, the mess that was caused by an uncontrolled dimension slash. Izuku would have smiled, but the heat had done serious damage to his face and he didn't have enough skin to do that anymore. Was it worth it? Yay. Izuku grunted as he lay on the ground, losing all feeling in his right hand as it went limp. The pain in his heart was becoming numb. It was almost time to go. You, not real, are you? No. Izuku couldn't feel his left hand either, or his left arm. The blood loss was seriously getting to him. Are you leaving, too? No, therapy doesn't work like that. But I suppose we're both leaving now. Wraith kept it to the facts as he sat down, watching the stars all by himself. He had tried to always stick to the facts, even the hard ones, and he intended to live as he died even if that included confirming he wasn't real. Opening parenthesis ... I saved someone. He's gone now. Izuku let his head rest on the ground. His vision grew dim and watery, but he couldn't close his eyes anymore. It was annoying. It was an inconvenience. But, worst of all, it was really scary. Yes, he will live because of you. Wraith gazed out over all the mess. If he could see what they had done, what would he think? Would he be proud, shocked, amazed by the power they had this whole time, or horrified by it? Could you stay with me? Izuku's eye turned upward as he tried to move one last time. He couldn't see through one eye because of the tears and couldn't see anything with the other because of the explosion, but his mind could still make out the vague figure of Wraith sitting beside him. Even if he was imaginary, even if he was all in Izuku's head. Opening parenthesis ... I'm scared. Wraith scooted over and placed a hand on the hero's head. Even if it wasn't real, it gave him a little solace as everything went dark. He couldn't close his eye though, so why was the world going dark? Why was he cold? Why was it so cold? Why was everything so? Chapter 148, Some Quiet Moments. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Almost everyone in the entire camp could see the sudden surge of blue light across the forest, but not a single soul knew what it meant. Even Kaminari couldn't figure out what coated the sky for a moment before disappearing with a low rumbling sound as everything began to collapse in on itself, falling to the ground and creating that rumbling sound. The heroes could somewhat communicate to each other, through Mandalay, so they did at least know that the third UA teacher had gone that way, but anything past that was impossible. The heroes could only guess what he had done or if he was even the one who did it. From their point of view, it could just be another attack from the fire villain, or a new villain altogether. It was impossible to tell from so far away. The villains didn't have any idea either. Twice scratched his chin as he looked at the view. I don't remember any Nomus with that quirk. Hey. None of those hero shits were supposed to be able to do that. The fuck is this? Dabi watched his next clone wander off as he checked comms. Shit, Muscular wasn't listening to his mic, but now it's dead. It overpowered Muscular. Probably not, it's more like Muscular threw off his shirt and broke the microphone on accident or something stupid. Dabi didn't even consider that Muscular, whatever his real name was, got beaten in this place. He had too much experience to die without saying anything. Muscular was at least smart enough to radio in or use the Nomus if things got serious. Probably. There were too many things to consider, it was all a mess. Dabi shook his head. Well, that idiot's going to either be at the extraction point or our distraction while we escape. This is getting too dangerous. Does anyone have eyes on the target? Eyes on and captured, sir. Dabi wasn't familiar enough with everyone yet to recognize people by just their voices. That would be the guy in the circus outfit, the fancy one. What was his name? He just wouldn't mention it. Alright, great work everyone. Get to the extraction point. I shall be busy for a few moments. Dabi could at least remember Kurogiri's voice, especially when he was so important to everything. Last minute preparations on the containment for our guest. In 1 minute I'll be ready, just say the word for extraction. That's plenty of time, Kurogiri, we'll see you there. Dabi called in the Nomu and gestured for Twice to follow suit. This part, the ending, could make or break this whole operation. Muscular was basically a lost cause since he couldn't get the extraction message, but he was so dangerous and uncontrollable this was probably for the best. Dabi smiled once before they set off into the woods to the extraction point. Things were, at least so far, going well. Kaminari pressed his head against the window, watching the strange flurry of blue light alongside his classmates. Dude, holy shit, the fuck is that? Everyone, step back. There's no telling where more villains will appear. Vlad King scolded them before looking himself, unable to hide his bewilderment. Could any of the pros do that? Mina thought it through, tapping her chin. I never figured out what the green-haired one did, ya know. The one with the yellow outfit. Maybe this is her quirk. No, Ragdoll's quirk was to find people in a certain radius. She hasn't been in contact since the start of this mess, brr. Everyone stopped as Mandalay sent another message straight to their minds. The villains have begun to retreat. They said they accomplished their goal, but we don't know what it was still. Everyone, remain on high alert and reunite at the main building. The message ended and left everyone looking around, slightly confused. So, we did it. We won. We're alive. The students began to hug each other as they exclaimed their joy. Most of the students were back from the woods by now, just leaving a few heads from each class unaccounted for as they cheered. They were just happy it was all over and they all made it out. Stay focused everyone. The villains haven't left yet and there are still people missing. Vlad King reined them back in before glancing out the window, surprised to see that the strange new blue light was gone. Maybe that was a signal to the villains so they'd know when they were done. Hardly matters now. Vlad King refocused on the current issue and faced the students. Alright everyone, line up by class and by number. Leave space for anyone missing right now, we're gonna do a roll call. They had a lot to deal with going forward, so it was time to start dealing with the issues one by one. Kurogiri teleported onto the scene of the disturbance, glancing in either direction to try and find the source of the chaos. Alright, great work everyone. Get to the extraction point. The Nomus were destroyed. Not even their regeneration would save them from such grievous wounds. I shall be busy for a few moments, Kurogiri spoke briefly into the microphone as he surveyed the scene before he found the epicenter. Last-minute preparations on the containment for our guest. In 1 minute I'll be ready, just say the word for extraction. Goto Masuji, the villain known as Muscular, was definitely dead. That red stain in front of the important point probably used to be him, but there were enough chunks that they could probably still get something of his quirk from his corpse. But he wasn't the main issue. That's plenty of time, Kurogiri, we'll see you there. The line went silent and left Kurogiri to focus on what was in front of him. It was hard to tell what it was without touching it, so Kurogiri gently placed a hand on its head and turned it slightly to confirm his suspicions. A corpse lay face down, mumbling to itself. Its mouth moved, but all that came out was mumbled garbage. His face was mostly burned off, his lips melted together and his right eye entirely gone. His chest was noticeably deformed where his ribs had caved in. Despite all of that though, it was easy to tell who it had been who it still was by the outfit. If he acted quickly. Kurogiri spread some of his cloud over both of them before activating his warp ability to begin taking them to safety. His first warp put them inside of the military base. He could only go so far with one teleport and it was best to go somewhere he was familiar with on the first jump before things got dicey. Kurogiri tried to stop the bleeding to the best of his abilities with his clouds, but it was a cloud for God's sake. It was practically useless. He'd need to get there quickly. Next was the longest jump so it took a little time to build up the energy. Took a lot of power to cross large distances, and that power had to come from him. This first teleport was just so he couldn't be disturbed while he made the big portal out. Kurogiri created the portal straight to the Nomu lab where Master should be waiting and walked through, still holding the wounded child as his breaths ran dry. He was gone. There was a final small shudder as he stopped moving entirely, his burnt face relaxing. It was a cruel fate. His jaw had been shattered by some great deal of force and his skin partially ripped off his head. His left side was heavily damaged, and he was still dripping blood as Kurogiri entered the laboratory holding the limp corpse in both hands, walking quietly towards All for One's office. The door was thrown off its hinges as All for Oneno, as Hasashi Midoriya stood there with his face completely distraught. He could not be considered the head of a criminal empire right now, just a father who'd been a moment too late. Kurogiri. Is he? Kurogiri shook his head and Hasashi grimaced for a moment before his usual cold attitude and determination took over. Get him to the laboratory now, and get Dr. Garaki there too. Then finish your mission. The cold fury on All for One's face could make a man drop dead on the spot, rage focused into a single purpose to bring out his full potential. It was this kind of hatred and focus that had first founded his empire. There would be no more pity, no regrets going forward. Yes sir, and good luck. Kurogiri disappeared without another word as All for One kept his face on, only breaking for a moment when he had just a second to himself. So doctor, what killed him? He entered with the presence of a murderous god, not bothering to restrain any of his fury as he overlooked the laboratory usually used for nomus. It's gonna be a race, but the result's the same. Either bleeding out or a punctured heart and the brain starved of oxygen. You want him alive or dead? This wasn't the first time All for One had been like this, but it was the first time in a long while. He treated this as professionally as he treated everything, looking over the new patient, and, no, he didn't have a clue who this was. Alive. Is there any chance to use regeneration quirks to heal him? All for One might have been beyond furious, but his fury wasn't directed at the doctor. They were all just doing their jobs here after all. Nope, his body's condition is too bad. It'd end up accelerating the death as the body tries to adapt and uses up too much energy. Stuff like this was why Dr. Garaki was so calm. He was great at this shit. He'd been doing it for what, 150 years? He didn't even know these days. He really was getting old. You should put him in stasis while we get ready. Definitely going to need an external healing quirk to start. We've got to fix that body before we can put any regeneration in. And some of the limbs will have to be replaced. All for One caught on quickly as he selected the stasis quirk. Time freeze was best, but it required a lot of energy. It had difficulty lasting past even 3 seconds. Flesh to stone. That could work. It'd stop the bleeding while they got ready to heal him, but it'd have to be injected into the boy's body, which had the same problem as the regeneration quirks. He settled for a simple quirk, one of the first and more powerful quirks that he had. He had to reclaim the quirk from one of the books, tapping a page as he reclaimed the quirk, then used it on the wounded boy. Pause. The body took a grayish tone as it stopped. This required no energy to maintain because it just stopped all energy. Normally it was very easy to break when the person in question tried to move. It didn't take a lot of energy to overpower, but a corpse was physically incapable of overriding the quirk. No limbs are getting replaced, the regeneration will take care of it all. Nomu, go get some blood. Oh positive, it would seem. Really good for donating, really bad for a patient. Dr. Garaki checked his patient's blood type and shook his head. We've got a few minutes to get him working before the brain completely shuts down. Every second's bad in times like this. I assume he's not going to become a Nomu. Correct. The doctor didn't question a thing as he nodded, then took a closer look at the body in the metal bodysuit made from muscles, tapping it as he thought this through. Alright, we'll need to take this thing off before the real work can start. Clean him up and prepare for surgery, this is going to be rough. We shall call for you when he's stable enough to receive his first regeneration quirk. The doctor bowed as All for One took one last glance at the boy on the table, then nodded as he left. I await your progress eagerly, Dr. Garaki. No other words were spoken between the two as the Nomus and assistants got to work, setting up for a long night. It was going to be a long night for all of them. Alright, he's unconscious. We got him. Toga laughed as she kicked her legs, looking at the boy strapped down like some kind of weapon. Bakugo had been secured to his mobile prison with a multitude of things to ensure he didn't escape while they set everything up. Yeah, shame about Mustard though. Dabi was genuinely sad about Mustard's absence, he had seemed pretty young. He was also a lot less dangerous to the group, unlike the other 2 missing members. Does anyone know what happened to Mustard, Moonfish, or Muscular? Yes, they all had M code names and paid the price. No sir. Twice spoke the obvious, since he had been beside Dabi the whole time. If Dabi didn't know, no chance Twice did, but he did shake his head as Magna stepped up. Then how am I here? Magic. Ronin was there for some reason, guys. He went off towards the Nomus and Muscular. Most of the people here didn't know who Spinner was talking about, and Dabi was one of them. It didn't matter though because he could still get the overall message. So that Ronin guy probably destroyed Muscular's earpiece. Dabi nodded as he glanced around. Probably got too hooked into a fight, and now he's paying for it. Anybody know where the others went? Moonfish said he found Bakugo after all. Bakugo was in a group when I caught him with a bird-headed boy, a large man with multiple arms, and a boy with red and white hair. The last boy was the ice one who lost to Bakugo in the last round of the sports festival. Mr. Compress detailed each of them as he cleaned his coat. They didn't even notice me sneak up behind and get the bird and our guest, so unprofessional. What are heroes these days becoming? So no sign of Moonfish. Dabi redirected the conversation to the initial question, slightly tired from having to constantly take control of everything. He didn't like Moonfish too much, the man was an actual cannibal after all. He was hard to control and didn't take orders at all. Dabi hated everything about the guy. He could understand that the guy had mental issues, but Dabi drew the line well before eating people was even close to the table. No sign at all, sir. It seemed everyone had accepted that Dabi was the leader at some point and he wasn't quite sure that was a good thing. At least the loosest of the loose cannons had managed to fall off the ship all on their own, but he'd still miss Mustard. And Mustard. His smoke cloud came up, but it never moved. I think he got down pretty quick. So Mustard at least did his job. Dabi shook his head, then focused on their handy helper, the smoky guy who followed Shigaraki around. Thanks for the help, Kurogiri. I was worried you'd be late with your message, but you beat all of us to the extraction point. Kurogiri had teleported straight on top of Ragdoll and defeated her single-handedly, which was the first step to victory. If she had radioed in and alerted the rest before she got knocked out, things would be a lot harder. Think nothing of it. We'll be ready to leave shortly, so everyone prepare yourselves. Kurogiri handled things as professionally as ever, bowing to them as he picked up the unconscious heroine. I think this extra present we got will be a welcome gift as well. For how things went, you all have done excellently. For how things went. Please, things went great. Toga laughed as she slid off the box. I only got 2 people but I got a lot of blood. Those heroes weren't too great either, thanks. Magna stepped up as well, taking a rag from Mr. Compress to clean her large magnet. That Ronin guy though, he one-shot our Nomu. Don't know how. Was your Nomu impressive physically? We had some rather weak ones mixed in, and I can't remember which one you had. Mr. Compress didn't seem too worried about this at first, since there really were some pathetic ones. You only needed one good stab to kill some of them. I think so. I'd have trouble fighting it, but this Ronin guy didn't seem too tough. He had a sword and I was going to fight him, but Spinner stopped me. Course I did, big sis Magna. He's Ronin. Does no one else here know who he is? Spinner looked around while Dabi leaned forward, resting his head in his hands. Seriously. We're ready to go, but I feel the need to warn you. Kurogiri spoke up as he began to create his smoke portal thing, spreading it out to cover all of them. Every Nomu that is not here presently and Muscular were all killed by the same opponent, someone who created that light show you all should have seen tonight. That wasn't Dabi. Toga glanced over at him, proving that most people thought that second blue light was just him again instead of some unknown second party. Dabi shook his head before everyone turned their attention back to Kurogiri, who took out something. The remains of a hand. Muscular's left hand. It had been cut apart with clean strikes, severing off some fingers and chunks of flesh with ease. Kurogiri tossed it casually into the middle of the room. That someone was Ronin, and what was done tonight made someone very angry. And with those ominous words, they were all teleported back to their base. All for one read through the plan one last time, checking every detail against what he knew. He spent years planning this next moment, becoming ready for everything. And now, he'd done it. He was ready. Bakugo had been kidnapped. The League of Villains would take him to the bar to hide him as if it was a safe house, proving how bad Shigaraki was at this still. A rookie mistake, but this would teach him an important lesson going forward. He was unsure if Bakugo would switch sides, but it hardly mattered. It was the next step that was important. He had a contact leak the bar's location and shady side earlier, and now with a child kidnapped and UA scrambling to cover for their faults, they would send one person to fix their issues, the one who always won in the past. All for one was almost positive that even the Heroes Association wasn't idiotic enough to send in All Might alone. It was more likely that they would bring some police in for the arrests, but that was more for show than for results. Maybe a few heroes as backup, but they wouldn't matter. They couldn't stop her. All for one smiled as his eyes flickered to a handheld screen showing the security footage of the Nomu facility. This was where they had set up for infusing quirks into all their willing customers, including Ronin. Against their little special gift, the Hero Association didn't stand a chance. The only one who stood a chance was All Might, and that was the point. They'd negate each other and, by going all out, would force everyone else to leave. When All Might got serious, All for one would force the League of Villains to leave no matter if he was winning or not. It would be better to safely evacuate them in advance either way, since he too was going to have to get out of the spotlight of the reporters and heroes if he won, and if he lost it would serve to protect Shigaraki and ensure the future of his work. Now All for one was smiling wide as he thought through all of it. All Might would self-destruct with his stupid ideals, and if he did not, All for one would have the pleasure of killing that piece of shit himself. All for one had planned for every possibility, and that meant every possibility led to his victory. Worst case scenario, All Might's true form would be shown and the public's faith in heroism would be damaged again. And right after the kidnapping too. Such a blow could be dangerous for hero society. To build yourself off the fickle whims of society. Truly, heroes are much braver than I could ever be. Or perhaps, the simpler answer, they're more idiotic than we could imagine. Kurogiri approached with a pair of drinks, carrying them with the care and style of a professional and seasoned bartender. With all due respect, sir, what are you doing here? The raid was a success. Not a masterstroke, we lost 3 men and most of the Nomus as you predicted, but Shigaraki has had a great victory. Kurogiri handed him a glass and clinked it with him. Are you thinking of backing out? No. All for one got a chuckle out of that as he swirled the glass, then glanced at the door he'd just been standing outside. This is my path. I made it and I intend to see it through. I'm just being sentimental. We've won, you know. All for one smiled as he faced Kurogiri, putting his notes and plans away. It's over, and we won. It doesn't feel real. The fight isn't over. But it is. All for one walked to a nearby window, opening the shutters to stare out at the sunrise. Neither of them had slept in years, so pulling all-nighters like this was easy. Everything big has been taken care of. It's all planned out, so there's nothing more to guess. After this, there's nothing more to do. And that scares you? A little. It was a slow conversation between two of the most dangerous men in Japan. They could do almost anything they wanted these days. But they didn't want much anymore. They were old. They were tired. It was time they retired, that they moved on. Quote. Shigaraki needs you to guide him but does not need me to shelter him. I must be removed from the equation for his best future, and his real test will start. Other forces will rise as well to challenge him, but if he's strong enough, he will overcome. That's how the real world works, the weak break and the strong rise. In the lines of both villainy and vigilantes, it was the strong and lucky who lasted the longest. Muscular had been strong, but he'd been unlucky. Shigaraki wasn't strong, but he was lucky to be in the League of Villains. It was time to see how he'd improve. And him. How will the boy do? Kurogiri gestured towards the door they'd been standing outside of. The glowing red operating hung overhead, letting everyone know not to disturb the room. Quote. I'm not sure. All for one's face flinched but returned to the calm neutral expression after a moment. He could be great, you know. He's very smart. Smartest in his whole grade. Yes sir, I seem to recall you telling me a few dozen times. You could go in, you know. You're the head of this entire organization, the doctor wouldn't say no. And do what? All for one scoffed as he leaned against the window, shaking his glass as he peered at the peeking sun. Watch. I'd be useless, there's no reason to go in. There's no reason to be here either. Kurogiri walked beside him and took a drink, staring out over the city with him. And yet. Hey, so you got me. It was not All for one responding anymore, but Hisashi who took a slow drink before responding. Quote. I'm going to have to think of a cover story for the brat. Do you know what he told his mother he was doing? Camping. He was right next to the microphone when he told her his plans. Hisashi didn't keep the computer that monitored his wife and son in any of his big hideouts, but he regularly checked up on it. Maybe I'll make something up about a camping accident and leave him in a hospital. We can't fix all of his injuries. Gonna have to leave some damage so it looks real. Another drink. Hisashi pressed his hand against the one-way glass of the window, smiling despite the mixed emotions in his eyes. This is all so messy. It would seem so. The light above the door went off and All for one went back inside, careful to keep himself clean as the doctor greeted him before standing over the cold body on the table. It was hard to recognize who or what was on that table. The left side of his face was burned off, showing teeth and eye that should have been underneath skin. His right eye had a piece of shrapnel lodged inside it. His hair was burned and tangled, but he could still recognize the boy under it all. All for one took a deep breath as the doctor talked through everything. I'd say we give him one regeneration quirk to start, and it's going to be a weak one. However, when we give him the second regeneration quirk, we can also swap the first one out for a stronger quirk. Right now it's more the machine keeping him alive than his body, but once he stabilizes we'll have much more leeway. All for one noted the cut-open chest cavity. There were several ribs removed from the body, giving the chest a strange twisted appearance in addition to the noticeable lack of a heart. Hisashi swallowed down something trying to rise in his throat and nodded his head. Very well. What time will he receive the second quirk and switch? I'd guess. 4 hours. That's when I'll check up with him anyway. The doctor set a timer as Al for one gave the corpse on the table a quirk. If you want to avoid no mummification, we should top it off at around 3 quirks, but that's a matter for later. How long should the recovery take? He kept it all business as he looked past the boy on the table and stared down the doctor who'd begun to put things back inside, cleaning the blood off of the heart so it could receive air before he put it back inside gingerly. At this rate, a day, if he's lucky. Realistically, 2 or 3 days. Dr. Garaki kept it simple and straight as he had one of the Nomus hold the heart in place while it slowly healed. This avoided the need for stitching. Sort of. All for one wasn't sure how practical this surgery method was, he just knew that it worked. He never questioned it before. Very good doctor, keep up the good work. They exchanged bows as All for one left, making his way outside and closing the door behind him. Everything was going to plan. Everything important was on track, the plan was solid. So why was he getting so worked up? Hasashi turned to look out at the sunrise one last time, pondering why it looked so watery this time before he left. He had done a lot of things, he deserved a lot of things. Not one of them was good. Nothing good could come from getting involved now. The plans had been cemented. This was goodbye. They had made their own plans, they had walked their own paths. And now, they parted. Hasashi gave a watery smile as he closed the blinds and descended into the dark once more. It was time to finish this. Chapter and notes. Why it's been so long. What's up? What's going on? Enough questions, it's time for questions. Was this include Midoriya technically and legally dying so I could put it as a tag part of the original plan? Yes, right now everything from Midoriya getting up to the end of this mess was planned out in advance, unless I come across something else I forgot like an idiot. Again. Did you just bait us into thinking Midoriya died? Nope, Midoriya legally died. His heart stopped, his brain started to go, he legally died. Big sad, F's in the chat for the boy. What's the timetable for all this looking like? Day 0 campus trial of courage, gets attacked, Midoriya wrecks himself day 1 something like 5 in the morning, Midoriya's surgery wraps up that's all that has happened so far but in canon tilde. Day 1 canon, UA. Holds a meeting about what happened, plans out attack. Day 2 canon, Midoriya and canon, Bakugo both wake up 2 days after everything, no it's never explained why Bakugo was asleep for 2 days because he wakes up at night for some Arya-san the rescue attempt ensues. Not many people seem to remember there was a day between the camp and the rescue attempt, just wanted to bring awareness to that. Other housekeeping stuff. Man, there was so much cut content because it didn't fit the tone. In the original draft, the camp attack was going to show a lot more of the other students and the invaders, but then I realized I wanted this all to be focused. However, someday, I want to show my version of the Moonfish vs Bakugo Todoroki fight before this wraps up. On a more serious note, I really enjoyed the no-notes experiment. I think it really shifted the tone in a good direction, but that tone shift happened because I usually put something in the notes. I think I like being able to communicate a little more, and I have some things I want to say for the upcoming chapters, so I'll be restarting them here. Well, I don't really have a lot to put here even though I want to talk forever. I guess I've got to go now. It's late and I'm pretty tired. Still, I hope this has been fun for all of you. Congrats to everyone who guessed this was coming. I think, while predictable, a good story should be able to be predicted because it means you're consistent. Now it's time for my consistently bad exit. I'll see you all soon. It's been real. Chapter 149, Break in the Storm. Chapter Summary. A moment of calm before everything goes to shit. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The emergency services took care of the forest fire quickly enough. They only just missed the villains, escaped by a few minutes and were able to completely smother what was left of the fire. The fire itself was also nearly put out by a strange phenomenon to the east of the camp, where Kota's cliff had been. A large section of land had been completely decimated, some of which included the fire. The trees had fallen to pieces, the ground had turned into fissures, and the cliff had collapsed when most of its west face completely disappeared. 15 students were hospitalized, 11 had minor injuries, but only 3 people went missing. Kazuki Bakugo from Class 1A, Tomoko Shiratoko or Ragdoll from the Wild Wild Pussycats, and Ken the third teacher recommended by UA. It was unknown what exact time each went missing, but it was certain at least that Ragdoll had gone missing first. While no trace of Bakugo was found by search parties, a few things could be found by the other 2. Ragdoll's station in the woods was caked in blood and snapped in half, but there was no sign of her body. Paired with student testimonies of a villain with a warp gate and it was easy to see what had happened to her. Ken was easy to find, but figuring out what happened to him seemed nearly impossible. From the ruined landscape to the tons of corpses littered about, it was clear there had been a violent struggle. No one could figure out if this was some kind of weapon the villains used or if it was the act of Ken until Kota confirmed Ken's involvement and pointed out the existence of Muscular. Even with his confirmed existence, it took 2 hours just to find a large enough chunk of the villain to be used for identification. After identifying the death of the villain Muscular by finding what used to be the top of his head, it was still practically impossible to figure out what happened. The strange pattern of destruction told authorities that a quirk had been used, but no quirk this volatile was on record. A mysterious flash of light, and then everything seemed to fall to pieces. It was unknown what did it or what could have stopped it. It was a very high-threat quirk. What made it worse was the quirk user, or more specifically, the lack of one. Normally you could look up a quirk by its characteristics and link it to the identity of the user, but this quirk didn't exist. Because of the complicated way it had been used and the lack of witnesses, no one could figure out what the quirk actually did. And then there was that quirk user. Ken, no last name given. An old man roughly in his 50s. Scar over his right eye. Graying hair. All of it was complete bullshit. The entire identity was a total fabrication. The only thing anyone knew about this Ken guy was that he ate at a bar and went to UA several times. Oh, and there was one other thing. Why was Ken, the Ronin, at the UA training summer camp? Present Mike finished rubbing a hand through his hair, collecting himself. Nezu sat calmly at the head of the table as the teachers talked amongst themselves. There were 6 teachers in the meeting. Vlad and Eraserhead from the camp sat at the end of the table. Present Mike and Snipe sat on one side. Midnight and All Might sat opposite. All of them were discussing the plans for the future. There was a spot open at All Might and Midnight's table for Detective Tsukuchi, All Might's friend in the police force, and a spot on the whiteboard for the information he'd be bringing. He'd been slowed down by the sea of reporters outside. They had just gotten through a riveting conversation about possible traitors and gotten a call from Tsukuchi about a possible lead on the villain's hideout, but it had gone back to the traitor theory and refocused on the man of the hour. Present Mike was the most vocal of the teachers to no one's surprise, but Midnight wasn't far behind him. Ronin has been a criminal at large for a while, but he recently disappeared from the public. While he hasn't been linked with the League before, he totally could be now. Any of us could be linked with the League of Villains, calm down. I think your hatred of Ronin is guiding your judgment here. Snipe glanced out from underneath his hat as he read through the papers that just got faxed over. Ronin's also had a history of taking down criminals, not working with them. This would be a major heel turn considering his past. Still, you got to admit the way he left was suspicious. No corpse, no witnesses, bet he just made off into the night with the rest of the villains. Midnight stuck fast to her convictions, at least writing them out to their logical end. No one knew what happened to Ronin after Koda ran away, and even the details before Koda left were vague at best. If it really was Ronin, we've only got a report from a villain saying that, and I don't remember Ronin having an attack that could destroy that much. All Might glanced up at the board and the picture of the area destroyed by an unknown attack last night. Could it have been someone else? No, it was definitely Ronin. Eraserhead and Nezu spoke at the same time, confirming the third teacher's real identity. Well, his real secret identity anyway. He had the same sword and costume. He even wore his full outfit while he trained the kids. Eraserhead downed another high-energy fruit drink in an effort to stay awake. Nobody got a lot of sleep last night, and he was going to have to go on TV tomorrow. Great, but you're right, that attack was uncharacteristic. But believable. We've only seen him fight kids, he'd have no reason to use something that big until now. Ah, I know, but what is that power? Midnight slumped on the table, annoyed. She'd been in charge of Ronin for forever and she still knew squat about him, but apparently the annoying piece of shit had been coming to UA. His quirk makes no sense. I'll one-up you, Midnight. I'll one-up you and say what I'm guessing Nezu has been thinking this whole time. Eraserhead paused for dramatic effect to take another shot of juice to try and stay awake. I'm guessing that. It doesn't really matter anymore if it was Ken, or Ronin, or some other random schmuck, and we should instead be focused on what comes next. Well, I'll second that. Detective Tsukauchi walked through the door with the files that they didn't want to send through the internet in hand, passing them out to each table. Especially because that'd mean our prime suspect killed himself, a very untrader-y move. What? Ronin's dead. Midnight seemed more angry than in disbelief after what she'd been through, but she did have the most antagonistic relationship with Ronin. Shit. Fifth paper. We've got a few fingers, some flesh, and a lot of blood. We're running it through the records, but nothing so far. A few of the teachers grimaced at the up-close scene, now illuminated by daylight. It was a gruesome mess of blood and body parts, even by hero standards. It didn't look like a fight, it looked like something out of a horror story. Sixth paper includes a picture of where we believe Ronin was standing when the attack went off. Traces of explosives were found on the ground mixed in with everything else. The detective read through the Ronin part of the report since that seemed to be the current topic. The villain he fought was Goto Masuji, also known as Muscular. He killed the witness's parents 2 years ago, the witness being Koda. Muscular's dead as well, see page 7. The detective sat down after giving his report and posting the pictures up on the board, leaving everyone a little queasy. They were all heroes, but this was a little much, even for them. Still, as interesting as that site is, it's not the current issue. Nezu stepped in to refocus them, having let them run their pace about Ronin, who was, for the large part, pretty irrelevant to what was coming next. What Ronin had done in that camp was largely inconsequential compared to what they had to do next. The press might berate us for me choosing Ronin to be one of the teachers. It hasn't been leaked to the public that Ronin existed, let alone that he was at the camp. The press might berate us for getting caught by the villains, but our current goal is to locate and save the young hero student, Bakugo. Detective Tsukuchi has given us reports of sightings of a villain from the attack, sightings of him being at a bar in the Kamano ward along with activity from several members reported in the attack being in that area for the last few weeks. We don't care about publicity here, we care about saving people. That means we're going to focus on what we can do and who we can save. Understood. Sir. And UA has failed again. How many times can a hero school have its security be breached and still call itself a hero school? The television blared on and on inside the bar as the villains celebrated with a round of drinks. Seriously, how lame is UA for real? This was so easy. Toga laughed before she took another drink of her Bloody Mary. Regular blood. No one was quite sure. Their security really was non-existent. It's not that they were weak, it's that we're strong. Twice flexed his arms to show off before he raised his mask above his mouth and tried to shotgun a beer and instead spilled it over himself as his personality switched. Those morons couldn't fight worth shit. You know how many of Dabi's clones just fucking waltzed in? For fuck's sake. Hey, I'd at least like to think those clones did a little work. They were me, after all. Dabi chuckled as he played with his glass, then checked his cards. Shit, bust again. I'd recommend you keep the card tricks to me, Dabi, while you keep on dealing with the big fights. Mr. Compress laughed as he collected the cards from Dabi and Spinner, who was pumping his arms as he laughed. I must say, even if some things went a little unexpected, the intel was quite good, Mr. Shigaraki. Of course it was. And it went according to plan. Shigaraki looked up from his game, a single eye peering out from behind his hand. Yup, as messy as some of it got. No moves did distract the majority of their fighting force, it just turns out most of their fighting force is one guy. Magna laughed at the thought that, out of 6 pro heroes and 40 hero students, the strongest one was some random vigilante. Not a single hero, who was getting paid to do this, could beat some guy doing it as a hobby. This shit was hilarious. I've got to admit, I thought Muscular would just get stuck in jail on the second attack, not die in the first. Dabi chuckled as he scooted his glass towards Kurogiri, who refilled it without a word. But I think we've got to thank everyone for their accomplishments, including the world's best getaway driver. Everyone laughed and cheered at that as Kurogiri continued to supply drinks, his smoke seeming to form a smile around his face with no mouth. It was just the angle his clouds moved, forming an upside-down arc where his mouth should have been, but it was enough as his eyes bunched up. Now, we've all done our share. We've all worked hard to reach this point. Kurogiri placed another glass on the table and slid it to the end, his eyes following it as it slid to the last figure in the bar who was chained in place, unconscious still. And soon we'll see if it was all worth it. Beep. Kershaw. Beep. Beep. Kershaw. The robotic sound of the hard monitor mixed with the external oxygen supply gave a cold metallic feel to the surgery room as the corpse lay limply on the table, barely moving. Hasashi stood over the still body, cradling a glass of water. He needed to stay healthy after all, and this was no time to get drunk on the job so close to completion. Beep. Kershaw. Beep. Beep. Kershaw. People generally heard regeneration quirk and thought of regrowing limbs in minutes and healing otherwise fatal wounds in seconds. That wasn't really true to the reality though. Beep. Regeneration quirks took a lot of energy from the body, meaning a regeneration quirk worked best when you were full, well rested, and barely injured. They got less effective the more injuries the user had since they had fewer places to draw energy from and more to fix. They had to fix multiple places at once, too, so they were spread out across the body. If they could only heal 1 point of damage a second, that 1 point of healing was spread out to every single injury they had at once, making it incredibly inefficient when there were multiple injuries to heal at once. It wasn't like every wound healed at 1 point of damage per second, but the entire body healed at 1 point per second, making it very slow. It wasn't as nice or as easy as the movies made it out to be, and he'd know. He had to regenerate from just a head and torso twice. The whole thing way too complicated, really. Beep. Kershaw. Regeneration quirks didn't usually work as fast as people thought they did either. The starfish, the thing most people thought of as regenerating before quirks, could regrow lost limbs in anywhere from several months to several years for God's sake. Most regeneration was about on that level. Beep. Beep. Kershaw. Beep. ... Midoriya was still healing slowly. He was getting energy and sustenance from a tube alongside a quirk, supplying the maximum energy that the young boy's fractured body could take. How would his mind deal with this? Dying was pretty painful, and Hisashi was an expert on that. He nearly kicked the bucket a dozen or so times already, and odds were good this next fight wouldn't be pretty even if he won. All Might have been stupid, but he was at his most dangerous when he was backed into a corner. Even a domesticated dog like All Might would still bare its fangs if kicked enough. It was this moment that the plan hinged on. Would All Might's tantrum be enough to save himself, or would All for One claim the final victory? How would his son live in the world his father had ruined, just to settle his ghosts? How would his wife? Had he gone too far? Now that was a stupid question. Made him smile, but it was not a happy smile. He'd gone too far long time ago. He had become comfortable in a world too far gone, and now it was all he knew. Hisashi chuckled as he held his son's head, doing his best to peacefully implant the next quirk as Dr. Garuki gave him the okay while maintaining the stasis quirk. He then drew out the initial regeneration quirk and replaced it with a much stronger quirk. These were closer to the regenerating quirks that people thought of, but it still wasn't close. The regeneration nomus were known for generally took 5 or 6 good regenerating quirks. He could at least copy and replicate regeneration quirks by severing limbs and taking the quirk from those cut off limbs. It'd always be a step below the one he was copying, but it still could be a good quirk. It just made him value his best quirks a little more. All for One had all his quirks for the final battle planned out. Everything else was safely stored away for his little game, for when he was gone. One last help to his heirs, and one last problem for Hero Society as they descended into chaos. It would be amusing to watch, admittedly. He smiled as he stepped back from his last potential heir. Doctor, how is he? Give me the details. Well, all in all, stable but recovery slow. There are a few shards of metal in him, but the regeneration healed right over them, putting us a little behind schedule. Getting them out now would be difficult because we'd have to remove the regeneration and it'd set us back a few hours. The doctor read through the papers, bored. It sounded pretty interesting, but none of it really was. Will those shards do anything? They are possessed items. Not without power they're not. Dr. Garuki had gotten quite fond of the possessed items innovation and used a few himself, and was even using a few in this operation. Possessed items without power are just normal items. The fragments at worst might leech a little power from him, making him sluggish, but even still the human body will adjust. You've got some metal fragments in you too, you know. People get chunks of each other in them all the time, from fights to surgery. Lots of projectile quirks involve firing a part of your body, meaning they contain your DNA, but people hit with them don't get to use their quirks. Dr. Garuki flipped through the pages, trying to find a way to explain it. The body has no way to activate the quirk, so the shards will just be a minor nuisance at worst. Shame about the blade though. Suppose this means no one can get the original Yamato now. Yes, All for One chuckled as he looked down at the child on the medical table. He looked so fragile now. If the shards of Yamato were anywhere else in the world, be it a holding cell in Purgatory or within UA itself, we could acquire them. This is the one place that we can't get the shards from, not in time at least. Would you like us to try? The doctor checked his watch. There are a lot of pieces, but if we start now. No, everything will need to be finished before noon tomorrow. We are already beginning to evacuate and move equipment and personnel from this station to newer, safer fronts, and we will not slow down the plan now. This boy will be the last thing we need to move, and that is a problem for my other assistants. The boy had 2 regeneration quirks inside him at the moment and was already requiring less machinery to remain stable. When he got his 3rd quirk, he'd be entirely self-sufficient. So it was time to start moving the equipment from the lab that they weren't using. I am going to launch the SI Nomu from here. All I want in this facility by tomorrow night is Nomus and myself so that people who come here to scrape up what remains of the heroes will find no trace of your work. All for One began to leave as he spoke, announcing his final plans. So be prepared, doctor. You have a lot of work ahead of you. Of course, sir. The good doctor didn't question it as he adjusted the machines for Midoriya's new level. The boy had gotten 2 quirks, so he'd require a different level of energy and sustenance to continue to heal. While he wasn't in good hands, he was at least in very capable hands. All for One left the room and drew a phone, dialing someone up as he walked down the empty halls. He only stopped for a moment as the phone rang, staring at the closed window shades as he contemplated the theoretical. Click tilde. Yes, sir. Kurogiri, you are quite the man of the hour I hear. All for One smiled but there wasn't much emotion in it as he turned from the window, facing his future with a grim and hardened determination. Congratulations are in order. I am flattered, sir, but I doubt you called me up for just praise. It's that smart wit I like about you, Kurogiri. Quick on the uptake. All for One walked down the stairwell and entered the main body of the storage room, surrounded by tubes containing hundreds of Nomus. Shipping containers were loading up some of them now, taking them away for the future. They'd be shipped out across the world, to the right people with the right kind of cash. I am in need of some help, you see. I must admit, it's when you play around like this that you scare me the most, sir. What would you like me to do, sir? I just need your help moving some things, that's all. All for One entered the hidden elevator and descended into the secret basement, deep below the storage facility. This area was very empty, with only 8 large tubes currently. They were transparent with a semi-transparent blue liquid inside of them and humanoid shapes floating inside. All for One ran his fingers along the glass, watching their eternal sleep. It is nothing complicated well. The average citizen wouldn't recognize most of them, nor would the average historian. The first was from almost 150 years ago, after all. Even then, they were heavily damaged before he collected them. 1, 2, the 8th, didn't even have anything in them yet. But his focus was on the 7th one, the complete one. It is nothing complicated yet. In these tubes were 6 corpses, but inside the 7th. He'd taken good care of her for this moment. He thought up this plan 50 years ago but only accomplished it on the 3rd try. On the table across from the tubes lay an old uniform from an era long ago. All for One picked up the yellow cape resting on the table, running the fabric between his fingers. It had been damaged by their fight and would need to be replaced, but he already ordered her a new suit. He wanted her to look her best for her reunion with her student after all. The student she abandoned her family for. I need some help setting up for our finale. I just want to make sure our parting gift is perfect, after all. How thoughtful of you, sir. Am I going to the basement? Yes, and bring twice. We will need him too for this last surprise. I will see you shortly. All for One ended the call and refolded the cape, placing it over top the black jumpsuit before taking a step back to look at his collection. She was the greatest Nomu he'd ever made, but that was to be expected. She technically once had 8 quirks at once, so she really was perfect Nomu material. All for One smiled as he looked at the glass, then turned away as Kurogiri arrived with a confused twice. Everything was coming into place. Chapter End Notes. Yo child eating yo. Quick notes for a quick time before I get into a small thing I wanted to put somewhere but it really didn't fit the tone. Housekeeping Tilda. Wait, I don't have anything. Shit. So, I can't really think about anything to say about this chapter other than I accidentally posted it once before with no notes cause my brain is just for decoration. This is mainly just set up for the future and reminding readers of some stuff from way back when, as well as explaining that no, Yamato is not coming back. You're not reforging it unless you want to cut apart Midoriya to get most of the remaining chunks, and even then there are some stuck in the woods. Good luck finding it all. Lastly, I wanted to try and take a second to post a scene in the notes that I wanted to include but couldn't because of tone. This is my version of a canon scene because, like most things in this arc, I think it's stupid. Enjoy. Havesies and Bakugo had to dance backward as metal blade things came from almost every direction. This was a total pain in the ass, just like Mandalay's nonsensical orders. Fight, don't fight, could someone make up their fucking minds? Careful, if you use any large flames around here and the fire spreads, we'll be surrounded by flames and everyone will die. That half-and-half bastard was trying to tell him what to do. Worse than that, he was being a fucking idiot. Their opponent, some moron in a black gimp suit with no arms, flew through the air with just his teeth as he latched onto things, screaming about blood and shit. Fucking pissed him off. First off, ya fucking dumbass spread the fire. What's your second quirk, jackass? Bakugo leapt backward to dodge another dozen or so blades that nearly hit him as he raised one arm like he normally did, then cupped his palm with the other hand like he'd been training to do. Under 20 meters to gimp shit, that was right in his range. And secondly, don't tell me what to do, ya fucking mismatched candy cane looking backwoat shit. Special move, Todoroki's a dumbass shot. Ka tilde blam. Bakugo grinned as he fired a concentrated blast and nailed that nimble fucker right in the skull, stopping all blades for a second before he fired 6 more and shot the slippery bastard out of the air. The villain plummeted out of the sky and crashed into the ground, barely moving. The Santathian dipshit and Bakugo looked at him from a range while Candy Cane had adjusted the extra he was carrying. Do you think he's still conscious? Ka tilde blam. Ka tilde blam. No, gonna spread the fucking fire the fuck is your ice quirk for, dumbass? What, you put all your fires out with magic till now? Fuck sake. Bakugo snarled as he walked past, casually doing one last explosion into the villain as they made their way towards the camp and out of this fucking forest. Chapter 150, A Quiet Kind of Loud. Chapter Summary. The final setup before everything goes off. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Across Japan, everyone was moving to the rhythm of an unheard symphony. The public played the background. They turned against UA as the news of the summer training camp broke out, berating them for their bad decisions and incompetence. This would set up them turning against all heroes in the future, sowing the seeds of discontent and bringing rise to new levels of chaos. The reporters and the police paced it all out for the world, priming everyone for the fight that only a select few knew was rapidly approaching. The news would do anything for a good title, even if that would lead to their own country and society imploding. They kept the time, a constant and consistent snake that'd bite anything for a little attention. The police were the same, another part of the percussion as they tried their best to keep the peace and quiet. Their slothfulness and restrictiveness would serve to annoy the public, forcing them to wake up and realize that they were being contained instead of protected, and from there. But that was only the background. The focus, the centerpiece of this symphony, was the heroes and the villains. Who else could it be in this world that was married to the concepts of spandex and speeches? The fools and criminals would take center stage, and the last 12 years he'd spent planning would finally all pay off in a single glorious night. The heroes, if his reports were correct, had taken the bait. With the public turned against them, they were showing their weakness and desperation for a win against the League of Villains and would grasp any straw they could, not bothering to check who was holding the other end. The League itself stood next to no chance. The heroes would send in All Might, who to most villains seemed unbeatable. His overwhelming power would most likely tear straight through the League, and would serve to teach Shigaraki a great lesson about his new enemy. For all his power, Shigaraki was still weak. He would need to get much stronger in the future, and the chaos All for One was about to cause would serve as a great place to train him. All for One would have to let the League be defeated to give the heroes a chance to raise themselves up before he smashed them down. One could not lower what was already at the ground, so he'd give the heroes hope. By him giving them hope, he could control the hope. By controlling the hope, he'd have an easier time taking it away. And, by taking their hope away, he'd plunge the world into the dark age of heroism. The League would lose, yes, but they would grow from it. A wise killer once said people revealed their true colors when they were at risk, and All for One intended to expose the League of Villains to the League of Villains. They would grow to understand themselves and each other, bonding and uniting for a common cause. Hasashi smiled as he took another drink of water before checking the time. It was the 13th of August, 2 a.m. The information he'd stolen said that the heroes would be attacking tonight, in roughly 16 to 20 hours, with more details on the way in 8 hours. This whole plan was rushed, as expected for a plan made in 2 days. A fun little twist was some mention in the stolen plans of a tracker placed on one of his Nomus. He had found it almost immediately when the Nomu came back, but he decided to keep it around just to bring a few heroes here. It would split their forces and encourage them, making them believe that they had the element of surprise. Another thing to give them hope before he took it away. He sat alone in the dark, eating a nice quiet meal by himself as he mused about the future. A whole lot of planning went into this moment on his part, and he was confident the plans he'd built up from thinking this through for 50 years would pay off compared to the work of a room full of morons who only cared about their bottom line, trying to save a child for the sake of publicity. That's really what this was for, wasn't it? Publicity. If the heroes really cared about Katsuki Bakugo, they would have waited a little longer. They would have planned things out more. They would have gotten more of the top 10 heroes involved in this to take down the threat of the League of Villains, even if it inconvenienced the heroes. Heroes were supposed to serve the public, uphold the law, and protect people. This wasn't his philosophy speaking either, this was the actual original pledge when heroism became legal. He was there when it was announced, laughing and wondering how long anyone would bother to uphold such lofty ideals. But those ideals faded away faster than even he could have predicted. The heroes reported so far to be involved were All Might, to no one's surprise, followed by the likes of Endeavor, Edgeshot, and something Woods. He couldn't be bothered to remember the child's first name. All Might's teacher, the one with the gust quirk, would be there too. What was his name? Didn't matter. That teacher had known his prize Nomu too. Perhaps he should have her kill the teacher first, then start fighting All Might. The devastation that would cause would be delicious. But this raid against the League of Villains was a two-pronged attack. Well, attack was a generous term. This raid was more like a two-pronged implosion as the heroes divided themselves terribly, wasting resources and manpower on two fronts instead of one. It seemed that keeping that tracker, the tracker that someone from UA's training camp had planted on one of the Nomus, really had been worth it in the end. A pack of smaller heroes would be attacking the undebatably more dangerous Nomu storage facility. The League of Villains was at best 10 people, including Nomus. Even a moron should have understood that there were at least 100 Nomus being stored, just going off of the recent experiments he'd been having. Sure, rescuing the kidnapped boy would be difficult, but it would be difficult because of their own terrible choices. Leading the charge against the storage facility was, for some reason, best genist. Why on earth you'd want someone whose power stems from clothes to fight a whole swarm of monsters who are almost naked was beyond all for one. Maybe if he had a few concussions or was a total moron it'd make sense, but unfortunately, his brain was still functioning so it just seemed wasteful. It wasn't as if Endeavor was going to do much for the League raid, and he was much better at killing than subduing. The correct choice, not a better choice, was to send Endeavor to kill the Nomus and send Best Genist to support to help capture the League and rescue the child. The current choice was so bad it could only be described as the wrong one. Wasteful, inefficient, and thoughtless. It was disgusting. He took another bite of his food, smiling. He enjoyed these little moments, with everything slowly clicking into place. This was the payoff he'd been working towards, a nice relaxing meal to himself. Nothing to worry about, no heroes to get in his way, just a nice calm meal while he ate some katsudon. It wasn't a particular favorite to him, just a meal that he had a few times on some very good days. The memories made it better, the physical supplemented by the mental. It was through context that the whole thing came together to become a perfect meal for him, a chance to celebrate what he was doing. There would be heroes besides Best Genist, but their identities hadn't been confirmed by the time All for One got his information. However, all other top 10 heroes were accounted for and would not be near either building, so whoever they brought in hardly mattered. Actually, he somewhat wished they sent in Sir Night-Eye. Now there was a quirk he was genuinely distraught over. Sir Night-Eye's incompetence and cowardice kept him from using his quirk to its fullest limits. But that was hardly relevant to anything anymore. He'd take care of the heroes that came to bother him himself, then release his Nomus as All Might approached. Then, when All Might arrived, someone came into the room, having finished training. She had to be in top condition, after all, and that included getting used to the new quirks she had. While All Might couldn't even use one quirk correctly, she had gotten around to using 4 by the end of her career, including her own quirk. None of them were that difficult to replicate, which really outlined how idiotic this entire Own for All plan had been. He had dozens of quirks that could do the same things as the users could, but he never bothered to use them because they weren't very good quirks. Sure, a creative mind could use the quirks competently, but... Levitation. Seriously, did someone at one point stand up in a blaze of glory, thinking the reason they could never beat him was that they weren't balloons? Hasashi finished eating and chuckled, standing up. His third greatest creation immediately stepped in line, following him out of the room. He couldn't be staring off all day just yet, after all. He still had a lot of work to do. Midoriya needed to have the regeneration quirks taken out of him and be sent on his way for his alibi. Also, the Nomus still needed to be organized, and maybe while he was at it he could give their speeches one last read over. With this two-pronged attack, we will both disable the Nomu warehouse and attack a League of Villains head-on, safely rescuing Katsuki Bakugo while also destroying the League and restoring the public's faith in us. The Hero Association representatives' eyes swept the crowd. You all should know your teams and jobs already, but are there any questions? The pro-heroes and police began to softly speak among themselves, but there were no big questions raised. It was a multi-staged sneak attack against the League of Villains after all, and was entirely secret. No one outside of the very room they were in knew what they were doing or what their plans were. A few people had some minor questions about their positions, or more specifically a few complaints, but everything came together in the end. The League has left heroism on the back foot several times, with incidents like the Nomu attacks or the assaults on UA. The public has seen us failing time and time again to stop them and get the people heading this organization, but now it's our time to take the initiative. Do you all understand? There was a chorus of cheers and confirmations as the meeting wrapped up. This attack would finally stop the League of Villains in their tracks, and show the public what heroes were really capable of. Kurogiri handed Midoriya off to the one person who could be reluctantly trusted for this plan, giving careful instructions. Remember to read the papers we sent you. You're his cover story, after all, so you have to be ready to take the flak from his mother for this. Do you understand? Yup. Get him to some hospital. Already told Ma Kidwa she needs to know. The large man took Midoriya like a sack of potatoes, shrugging it off. Is gonna be real easy, but yeah sure ya one da main man ta do it. What, do you think it's beneath you? Kurogiri raised an eyebrow in annoyance, but he forgot that the man he was talking to was one of the greatest villains America had ever seen, the unstoppable Juggernaut. He might not have been smart, but he sure wasn't stupid. Nah fam, but I'm huge. I'm obvious. Dear had to be someone more. Shuttle. Someone more shuttle for this kind of backquote sheet. Mao's Japanese was as poor as ever, but his questions made sense. You didn't get to go head to head with Prime All Might and not lose in 10 seconds if you were a moron. The word you're looking for is subtle, and no. You're perfect for this if you remember your part. Kurogiri felt bad now, shaking his head as he stood in the forest with the giant. Mao didn't do this sort of thing. ever. This was his first time being the cover story for someone else, so it made sense he was a little worried. The big guy might usually be excited, but he could still think ahead. He just chose not to, cause he found it more exciting, which technically still was thinking ahead. Midoriya said he was going camping with friends from school like your daughter, so we're going to say you were the adult on hand. We have replicas of all the things that he brought to the camp. It's in this bag, so don't lose them. Mao took the bag from Kurogiri with a confused look, blinking. How do ya know what kind of sheet Sendipider brought to a fatting camp and backboat trip? It's complicated. That actually wasn't hard, just checking all the things that Midoriya had bought between a certain time period and then adding anything that Master said mattered. But that made him sound like a stalker, so he skipped it over. He was surprised he could still feel shame, especially for something as stupid as this. Actually, it was probably because this was so stupid he felt shame about it. Don't worry about it. Quote. Backquote K Cloudy. Mao laughed it off, not too concerned as he pulled out his instructions and read through them again. Suppose this means some big shit gonna go down. Correct. I get you fam, I get you. Mao read through the papers again, squinting as he used his brain for the second time this year. Anything bad for us? In theory, no. In practice, we'll both find out. Sheet, don't make it sound too good Cloudy. Mao shook his head and finished reading, then put the paper away. Ya wanna stay a while? Have something to eat? Dinner's gonna be ready in an hour, should be pretty sweet Tilda. No, unfortunately, I must get going. Kurogiri politely refused his senior, bowing. I am honored though. Alrighty, den next time once this big operation's over. Mao laughed as he patted Kurogiri on the back, handing him a bottle before he turned and walked back into his garage. Ya ain't getting out of this twice. Sure I'm not. Kurogiri chuckled as he turned his leg into a portal and fell through himself, leaving Mao to take care of the details. Mao might seem a little slow and like he didn't take anything seriously, but the main man had been a criminal for almost 100 years. He could handle one child easily enough. And if Mao could handle one child, Kurogiri could too. Kurogiri emerged from the back of the bar, grabbing spare bottles and cleaning supplies as he re-entered the bar room itself to find his bar was even messier than when he left, with everyone gathered to one side as they focused on the kidnapped child. The blonde bomber had woken up a while ago and everyone wouldn't shut up. It was only 6, but the League of Vandals simply would not shut up and stop making a mess in his bar. Kurogiri checked the bottle Mao gave him before popping the cork and pouring himself a tall glass with no ice to get as much alcohol as possible. Tonight was going to be a long night. Chapter and notes. Yo yagati yo. With this chapter, the last of the setup is done hopefully. I dunno, my stalling tactics are pretty good, but we'll start the next chapter with the hero's last minute prep and then go into the raid. This wasn't very long, but I'm sick of stalling and want to get to the action, but I wanted to better explain what was going to be happening with Midoriya, plus, I always love Mao. One of the hardest parts of a chapter with Mao is getting his speech right and making sure I don't mispronounce anything, or more accurately, making sure he mispronounces everything. Still, fast chapter for fast times. A little bit of comedy with the heroes to keep this from getting too samey. I'll shut up now, cause like all for one, I've got a lot of work ahead of me before this finale. Catch ya on the flip side. Chapter 151. Chapter summary. A whole bunch of canon stuff, which involved watching 5 minutes to death and me getting very annoyed at them. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Why'd I have to clean up after UA? They had been gathered into a tiny room with everyone doing their last-minute preparations, everyone, that is, except Endeavor. I'm a busy man. Endeavor had come fully prepared because, unlike the rest of these morons, he knew his job. Defeating villains. So he was always equipped for his job and didn't need to prepare anything. Anything made up in the last seconds never worked anyway, so it wasn't like he was wasting his time by not doing anything. No, he was instead wasting his time by being stuck here, helping a bunch of failures with something they definitely did not need help with. Come on, don't be like that. Edgeshot was checking something on his costume as he spoke, barely sparing him a glance. You went to UA too, didn't you? Yes, but back then it could handle its own affairs. Endeavor had been ready to go for 2 hours. Who knew how many patrols he was missing for? This, a rescue mission to cover face for a school that had no affiliation with him, made even worse by his role in this rescue mess. And why am I here if I'm not going to do anything? Are you deliberately wasting my time? Right now, we can't call any heroes away from UA, the man who some idiot had placed in charge of them spoke up. Detective Tsukauchi. He was a detective, not even a member of the special assault team. Why was someone useless like him here, to get in the way? Who the hell planned this goddamn mess? Please look at the big picture. The big picture. HMPH. That got a snort out of him as Endeavor smiled with all the warmth of a snake before turning to All Might, the newest hero teacher at UA who had somehow been called here. Yes, they couldn't call any heroes from UA that explained why All Might was 2 hours late, they couldn't call him so he must have just stumbled into this operation. If you could call this an operation, that is. The big picture was that the top brass was calling down everyone well-known and fancy so that UA looked better after their second fuck-up this year. There was himself, All Might, and Gang Orca. Top-ranking heroes famous for their strength. Kamui Woods, a rising rookie with high mobility and good capturing abilities, alongside Best Genius, the best hero in the industry with capturing abilities. However, their organization was a total mess. It's possible that this incident will become the impetus for the destruction of Hero Society. We must give it our all to make sure we resolve this successfully. Endeavor snorted at such filler words. What, did that imply that they didn't give it their all for everything else? He certainly wasn't going to be giving it his all tonight because they had tacked with the most useless role of all. For roles, they had decided to stick the rising rookie with the job of rescuing the hostage, something you definitely wouldn't want some newbie fucking up. Best Genius was, instead, going to capture some of those mindless Nomu bastards, the same kind that Endeavor had killed by the dozens a few days ago. It wasn't just a waste of his talents, this was mismanagement of everyone here. Based on the tracking device said by one of the students, we believe there are multiple hideouts. Who was this detective explaining this information to? The two groups of heroes had already split up into 2 separate buildings miles apart and it was painfully obvious that there were multiple hideouts. He knew because he had been clearly stationed at the wrong one. They should have sent both capturing heroes to deal with the League, since the League was supposed to be taken alive, and sent him to deal with the Nomus. He could burn down their entire hideout in 2 minutes without causing the fires to spread to nearby buildings, destroying it much more quickly and safely than a bunch of capturing heroes and fucking Gang Orca, who did not have a single power that helped capture or kill anything. What was Gang Orca supposed to do? Send his little gang in for morale? From our investigations, we know where the kidnapped victim is located. Yes, to where Endeavor was going. Going off to go stand around while a child was rescued by a rookie, the #1 hero, some random old man, and a fucking ninja. What was Edgeshot going to do? Stab anyone who tried to resist? Endeavor didn't pay that much attention to UA, but even he could remember that Horu was somehow a teacher there and created knockout gas as a quirk, but no. They picked All Might instead of the useful one. We'll send the bulk of our forces there and prioritize getting the victim back. And that was the central issue, sending the bulk of their forces. Endeavor's job was not to help anyone, it was not to rescue some fucking child who couldn't even run away correctly, it was to fucking stand around with the police and watch from a distance in case every single hero managed to simultaneously fuck this up. Somehow. He could have single-handedly taken out the Nomu facility, but Endeavor suspected that wouldn't look as good on paper. It would have shown the League for what they really were, a bunch of amateurs who were in over their heads. It would have shown UA like it really was, a joke that got beat by a bunch of amateurs. Twice. But if a large group of heroes went to take care of the Nomu facility, it'd show the public group cooperation and build up the League as a large threat, raising the public's views of heroes and other bullshit. Also, if he was shown to be standing back, it could be seen as him supporting this mess, that the League of Villains was so powerful that it required a hero just to be on standby and ready for if anything went wrong, and the #2 hero no less. At the same time, we will gain control of the other location that we believe is their hideout, cutting off all paths of retreat to arrest them all at once. Cutting off paths of retreat. The two buildings were miles apart, taking these two buildings had nothing to do with cutting off retreats. They had a teleporter for God's sake, the only way any paths of retreat were going to be cut off was if that teleporter was taken down. But as Endeavor angrily looked around, all the other heroes were nodding along and buying into this bullshit. This barely had a thing to do with efficiency at this point, it was all just a pose for the cameras and look pretty. Endeavor glared down his rival, All Might, who was talking to some random old man. He should have known this would have been a waste of his time when they were both called into the same place. They filled the exact same role, so you only ever needed one. Instead, All Might was going to get all the glory and win back the praise of the public for UA as a representative from that shitty school. All Might got the glory, the fame, the recognition, and Endeavor got to stand around with a thumb up his ass so that All Might and UA looked better. His scowl grew past what even he thought it could as this idiotic detective gave orders to 5 people who were way better at this than he could ever be, and that was being generous to these other comedians pretending to be heroes. Don't let the villains get away with anything. At the press conference earlier we had just the principal work with us to deceive the villains, the detective kept going on and on, explaining what was already plainly obvious. They already had their debriefing. Of course the UA principal worked with them, he did nothing but benefit from working with them. And don't say it like it was just the principal, those are 2 heroes who were so bad at their job they couldn't even protect 40 kids were there too. I had him feign distress, as if he was going through a very hard time. Endeavor checked the time, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Did this guy ever shut up? He was saying complete bullshit from start to finish. The UA principal better be damn distressed, especially after the shit show UA had been putting on. Getting back the boy wasn't going to solve all the problems, and if that principal was worth shit he damn well know it. After hearing those words, the villains won't think that we will rush in on the very same day. Glad he knows this is rushed, at least. Endeavor snorted with disdain, having been standing by the door ready for 10 minutes now. Sure, the League of Vandals wouldn't see it coming, but that wasn't because of the Hero Association or the police or whoever came up with this mess's master plan. The League wouldn't see it coming because they were a bunch of amateurs and weaklings who were stepping into the real world for the first time, and were stepping straight in front of a moving train. Let us retaliate. Come, it's time for our counterattack. Endeavor shook his head as everyone started to get some fucking motion going, with the world's most generic and repetitive speech finally wrapping up. Let us overturn this flow of events, heroes. The other morons seemed excited by the speech, proving that everyone else had turned their brains off and wasn't paying attention to a single thing this ace detective said. Endeavor sighed as they all walked out, glaring at the back of All Might's skull the entire way for the same reason as always. Endeavor had been pulling in 10 times the amount of villains as All Might for over a year now, and that wasn't even counting all the villain-less crimes he stopped. Yet, once again, here they were. Once again, the Hero Association called out their golden boy to show him off and take all the credit while Endeavor got shoved to the back. The association's discrimination against him used to be a lot subtler. He already knew he was the least popular of the top 10 heroes, he was only #2 because he got 5 times the amount of cases as the next best hero, who also wasn't All Might. Sure, All Might's quirk was better than Endeavor's. Endeavor could admit that, which made it more baffling what the fuck his rival was doing all day. All the time and effort he'd put in, the things done to set up for the future, and it was getting outdone by literally nothing. All Might barely patrolled for an hour anymore, but he was still top of the charts. Even when All Might did fucking nothing, Endeavor was still stuck playing second fiddle to him. Now he was going to go babysit some grown men who couldn't even beat a Nomu in a one-on-one fight under the pretenses that he was needed there, just so his rival could look better without trying. What a wonderful world professional heroism had become. Kurogiri sat in the back as the shit show got underway, checking out his bottles. He had to make sure that most of his stuff was already moved to the next phase, otherwise, he was going to go crazy. He didn't open a bar for the money, after all. It's so strange. Shigaraki turned off the television screen and faced their guest, smiling widely underneath his hand mask as he spoke. Why are the heroes being criticized? The way they were dealing with things was just a little off the mark. He had just enough Coca-Cola to make 3 more Long Island iced teas, and just enough time to chug all 3. Kurogiri shoved the last of his bottles in storage through a portal before coming back to barside to start making some, hoping to kill some of the incoming pain with the power of alcohol. He could barely taste anymore, but he could at least still get buzzed. Is it because their job is to protect? Shigaraki was still going off with his speech. Everyone was focused on Shigaraki and Bakugo, and no one noticed Kurogiri taking out a nice tall glass in his shakers to make the last drink of the bar. Everyone makes a mistake or two. Are they supposed to be perfect? He could make 1 drink every minute if he pulled back on the showmanship, but he was a classic villain and he wanted to enjoy himself. While Shigaraki was having fun with his dramatic words and metaphors, Kurogiri flipped his shakers through the air as he quietly enjoyed himself in the background. Modern heroes are so uptight. Don't you think so, Bakugo? Kurogiri stopped paying attention entirely as he poured out his drink, then added the cola at the end, taking a moment to appreciate his work. An edible masterpiece. The Long Island iced tea, Kurogiri's favorite tea. Since he couldn't taste much flavor, he'd always been a big tea fan. Since he couldn't taste alcohol's poor flavor, he liked it too. It was a shame there was no tea in this, but hey, it was the principle that mattered. He'd been healthy for a while. Today was his cheat day before he got his ass handed to him. He had his instructions and help from Master, but now all that mattered was to see the plan through to its end. This was where the real test started. With Master gone, the training wheels would be gone. Shigaraki would have no one to bail him out of his constant failings and would have to actually plan ahead for once. Holy shit, this tea was pretty good. What rum did he use this time again? Kurogiri checked the bottle before glancing over at the mess. Shigaraki's speech was just about wrapped up, and things were about to go wrong. We're planning on winning. You like winning, too, right? The boy, Bakugo, had a scowl that should have said it all. Kurogiri scooted half a step back in case the boy tried anything, sheltering his drink as he took a sip. Damn, this stuff was good, while Shigaraki addressed his coworkers. Dabi, release his restraints. Huh. Dabi glanced over, confused. This guy's gonna fight, you know. It's fine. We need to treat him like an equal since we're scouting him. While the method was flawed, Shigaraki showed that he had learned from their dealings with Stain. Stain had been treated like a lackey and punished Shigaraki for it, so now he was much more generous and patient with people he was trying to recruit. While this wouldn't work this time, it was a step in the right direction. Besides, you can tell if you'll win or not in this situation, right, you a student? Dabi took one look at Bakugo and immediately decided he didn't want to be the first person Bakugo hit when he got free. Twice, you do it. What, me? No way. Do it. Man. Twice nervously trudged forward, mumbling to himself as he tried to figure out how the locks worked so he could open them. I do apologize for using such forceful methods, but please understand that we are not just a mob trying to commit crimes. Mr. Compress spoke up from the far wall, wisely keeping his distance while Kurogiri took a second to evaluate his position before taking another step back for safety's sake. We didn't kidnap you by accident. Shigaraki began to speak about how all of them had been restricted by society while Kurogiri checked his glass, picked up his shakers, and started working on the second iced tea, thinking about the future. He knew the rough outline of the plan, with the heroes attacking sometime tonight. They had done a news broadcast about how worried they were if some weak attempt at a smokescreen, but anyone worth their salt would be on the alert after UA specifically admitted they had practically no plans of what to do next. If UA really did have no plans, they'd make up some story as a cover or just not comment on it. By saying they had no real leads, they basically admitted that they did have something and were trying to distract the league. Only an idiot would believe that broadcast at face value, and understanding such complications and ridiculous mind games was the first step to being a basic villain. Kaboom. And, to no one's surprise, Bakugo immediately attacked. Kurogiri tested his second drink, thinking through the ratios with barely a thought for what was actually happening in the room. He'd gone a little heavy on the rum this time, but he really liked this rum. He hoped he'd be able to get some more later. Bakugo started giving his own speech. Made Kurogiri wonder how many people had speeches prepared tonight. All for one had one plan too, and thinking of that got him back on track as he ignored the world surrounding him. He knew that the heroes would attack tonight, as he said before, but he wasn't exactly sure what would happen once he passed out. Still, Master would be able to handle it. Master could cover for all of the league's weaknesses, and that was what allowed Kurogiri to be weak this time. Until the heroes attacked, Kurogiri could close his eyes, sit back, and relax. Metaphorically speaking, literally, he could open his eyes, test his shakers, and get fucking plastered with his third and final Long Island iced tea. Still, the time to enjoy Long Island iced teas was growing short. Kurogiri leaned against the countertop as he drank his tea, feeling the large plastic sunglasses he picked up years ago pushing against his body as he moved. He had enjoyed these moments of levity, but they were only moments. They came and went, and they were already starting to go. Shigaraki wisely didn't waste time trying to reason with a child who wanted to fight, glancing back to the camera that their master was watching through. Few in the league knew who he was, fewer still knew what he meant. Master, lend me your power. Master. Bakugo smiled as he leaned forward, hands smoking. You're not the boss around here. That's not funny. Kurogiri, compress, make him go to sleep again. Kurogiri suspected his name was only mentioned because he was usually Shigaraki's right-hand man. What did Shigaraki want him to do, get the kid in a chokehold? I can't believe he's such a bad listener. I'm almost impressed. Mr. Compress shook his head as he calmly walked towards Bakugo, who had been standing in the corner not doing a thing since he first attacked. If you want me to listen, get on your knees and die. Kurogiri suspected his only purpose in being included was to remind Bakugo that, should he try to make any large explosions, Kurogiri could put them through a portal and have him blow up the wrong thing. Bakugo's eyes flicked across the room while Kurogiri started to make his final tea, then. Knock, knock. Hello, this is Pizza La, Camino store. Everyone stopped for a second as Kurogiri poured the last of the Long Island iced tea on the floor, catching it with a portal and teleporting it into his mouth. Looks like the pain train just rolled into the station, and this was his stop. Lucky him. SMA Ash. All Might shouted as he punched through the wall, taking out of the villains without even trying. The villains were taken by complete surprise, with even the smoke villain caught with a drink in his hand. No one was ready for this counterattack. Kurogiri. Gate. The smoke villain placed down his glass and began to spread across the bar as Kamui Woods emerged onto the scene, swinging in through the hole and straight into an attack. Preemptive binding. The wood stretched faster than the smoke, grabbing each villain and binding them in place to stop any further attempts to attack. Lacquered chain prison. A tree. What the hell? One of the villains, the scarred one, started to create blue flames off his body but was cut off as a small shape cut through the air and kicked him once in the head, knocking him out. Don't be impatient, Gran Torino spoke as he jumped back from his own kick, keeping an eye on all the villains. It'd be in your best interest to stay put. Just what I expected from one of the most competent new heroes around, Kamui Woods. And the veteran faster than the eye can see, Gran Torino. All Might spelled it out for the league so they could understand what kind of situation they were in. You can't run anymore, League of Villains. Why? Gran Torino returned to the entrance of the hole, glaring over the crowd as Kamui Woods reasserted his footwork to make sure none of them could move. All Might stood upright, smiling from ear to ear to show off his confidence as he dominated the scene. Because we are here. Right after the press conference. Don't tell me this was prearranged. Tree man, stop pulling me, push. No, no. The collective group of villains all had various reactions as they realized what was going down. When one is on the offensive is when one neglects defenses the most. Edge shot slipped through the crack in the door before returning to 3D and opening the door for the rest of their forces, showing off the SAT members armed to the teeth standing on the other side. We're not the only ones here from the Pizza La Camino store. Outside, you're surrounded by skillful heroes, like Endeavor and the police. Endeavor glanced around, looking at any other skillful heroes as he was stuck on the ground floor, but it was him and police as far as the eye could see. Tsukauchi, why does that American get to rush in while I'm out here holding the perimeter? In case we miss catching them in there, you've got a wider field of vision. Endeavor looked around at all the police that he definitely did not have a wider field of vision then, accepting that this bullshit wasn't going to get any better. Hopefully, they wouldn't stick around too long monologuing and would start arresting the dumbasses soon. Fine. I'm sure you were scared, but you did a good job bearing it. I'm sorry. All Might addresses the hostage, Bakugo. The young boy was free of his restraints already and All Might could see the worry in his face, even if he wouldn't admit it. It's fine now, young man. I wasn't scared. Not even close, damn it. He was at least swearing still. A weird thing to think, but to be honest, All Might was going to be a lot more worried if Bakugo wasn't swearing and acting like his usual angry self. All Might flashed the kid a thumbs up before turning back to the villains. After I went through all that trouble to prepare this, why are you coming to me, you last boss? Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains, seemed a lot calmer than they had last met. He was thinking this through now, trying to work his way through the scenario, but it was pointless. Everything had been taken care of already, even if he didn't know it yet. It can't be helped. We're not the only ones here. The same goes for us. As expected, Shigaraki went for the Nomus. He was in for an unpleasant surprise. Kurogiri, bring as many as you can over. Nomus, I presume. That got a smile out of all the heroes gathered in the room. What's the matter, Kurogiri? Shigaraki was getting frustrated now as he turned and looked at the smoking villain whose eyes were wide. I'm sorry, Tamura Shigaraki. The Nomus that were supposed to be in a fixed location are not there. Huh. You are still green, Shigaraki. All Might put a comforting hand on Bakugo as he spoke to the villains, explaining the circumstances that they fell into to them. Huh. League of Villains, you underestimated everything too much. The soul of a young man, the diligent investigations of the police, and... All Might locked eyes with Shigaraki to the best of his abilities. The hand on his face kind of got on the way, but All Might didn't let that deter him. Our anger. That's enough of childish pranks. This is the end, Tamura Shigaraki. All Might's full force of personality seemed to shake all of the villains. They weren't used to dealing with professionals, and facing the very best for their first time was rattling. The villains noticeable tensed up and scooted away at his statements. All the villains, that is, except one. The end, you say? Don't be ridiculous, I've only just begun. Shigaraki got his feet under him as he alone returned All Might's glare, matching and surpassing it with hatred alone. I'll destroy this garbage heap that you put a lid on with such vague ideas. It was for that purpose that I set All Might apart and started gathering people to my cause. Don't be ridiculous. This is the beginning, Kurogiri. Shigaraki called for his smoky friend to lend some assistance, but Edgeshot beat him to it, piercing the teleporter through the body and getting a few screams out of the villains. Ah, no, stop. I couldn't see anything. What, did you kill him? I played around with his insides and made him unconscious. He's not dead. Edgeshot spoke from his thin form before his head solidified and come into focus while the rest of his body was still thin as a needle. Ninpo, Thousand Sheep Pierce. This man was always a nuisance. I'll have him sleep. Gran Torino shook his head at the villains, scowling. Didn't I tell you earlier that it'd be in your best interest to stay put? Kenji Hikiyoshi, otherwise known as Magna, Astuhiro Seiko, or Mr. Compress, Shuichi Aguchi, the one who called himself Spinner, Hamiko Toga, also known as Still Toga, Jin Bubiguera, or the villain twice. With little information and time, the police officers worked through the night to determine your true identities. Gran Torino scoffed, shaking his head at the young kids. There's nowhere left for you to run. The villains were shaken, realizing that their real identities had been compromised, but only the true villain still standing remained unfazed. His hatred kept him straight and focused on All Might. Hey, Shigaraki, can I ask you where your boss is? Shigaraki's glare didn't lose focus by Gran Torino's comment. It hardened and zeroed in as he spoke, barely able to contain his rage any longer. This is unsatisfying. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. Where is he right now? All Might repeated the question, but whatever Shigaraki was focusing on, it definitely wasn't the question. His body twitched as his breathing became sharp, his red eyes staring off into the distance. She slowly brought his attention back to the present. Go away. Disappear. His eyes locked once again with All Might's. Shigaraki. I hate you. Shigaraki leaned forward, straining against Kamui's grip and pushing everything away with an almost physical level of bloodlust right as the air began to tear itself apart and the monsters began to crawl through. Chapter end notes. Yo-yo yagati-yo. So many canon scenes. Almost all of the dialogue in this chapter was canon, and that's the entire reason that I'm going to blame for how long this took. Among many other things. Namely, worrying about Endeavor. I have strange epiphanies while writing some of these chapters, and this epiphany was that it must suck to be Endeavor, and it really is All Might's fault. Let me back it up. All Might can, after defeating the sludge villain as he did in canon, has 3-ish hours he can be a hero. This is a year before All Might becomes a teacher, and, in this version, he doesn't have to waste time teaching Midoriya. Instead, he supervises teaching Mirio, which probably takes fewer hours. Let's say it only takes 1 hour. So, before this year, All Might could be a hero for 2 hours a day. Then he becomes a teacher and most of his hours are spent now as a teacher. Let's say once he starts teaching he only gets 1 hour to be a hero a day. All Might can barely stop any crime these days and has had this problem for around a year. We can see from the USJ that All Might can stop about 3 problems an hour, possibly including paperwork. Then there's Endeavor. He works all day, so he puts in way more than just 1 to 2 hours a day. He also likely works about the same pace as All Might, but even so he'd be pulling in more cases. But, for some reason, he's still the number 2 hero. Popularity, power, whatever the difference, it probably pisses Endeavor off. He's been a hero for almost as long as All Might, he's been trying for all his career, and he's still so far behind All Might. Even when he pulls in more cases than All Might, he doesn't get recognized for shit. Does it justify the piece of shit he is? Fuck no, but it puts into some perspective. On a different note, I have no idea how popular Endeavor is in canon before All Might retires, so I made him the least popular hero in the top 10, so that way the only reason he's recognized is that he's pulling 10 times the cases of the next leading guy. My final big part of this rant is that I see a lot of people berating Endeavor because of his gigantic personal problems, but no one points out that if you were stuck behind a moron whose only attack was basically flailing at the opponent for 20 years and everyone worshipped that guy, you'd be pretty pissed off too, especially if on a technical level you're so good that it's like you're not even playing the same game anymore. Ironically enough, the number 2 hero has some of the best quirk usages that we've ever seen in the series. Makes it funnier when the number 1 hero has the worst quirk usage we've ever seen. I feel a little pity for him on that front, especially because it really makes all the terrible things he's ever done worse because it all didn't mean anything in the end when All Might's karma catches up to him for being the worst quirk user in the world, forcing him to retire and giving Endeavor the lamest victory in the world, which probably pisses him off even more. Endeavor's shown to be very similar to Season 1 Bakugo. If you ignore the personality, he's pretty close to the perfect hero, and he's even closer to it than Bakugo was. Great amount of power, great amount of control, great reflexes, great thinking. Shame that a hero is a person and not a weapon, otherwise he'd take the cake. But since a hero is a person, Endeavor can eat shit. Anything else, anything else. Kurogiri was a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not sure if I like what I did with him, but I wanted to try it out. This is a rare moment for him since he gets to completely relax, since he already knows he doesn't have to do shit all day. A moment I wanted to include was something that happens in canon which is incredibly stupid, but only shows how stupid it is from his perspective. In the comments cause I ran out of room. Thanks for reading if you don't want to check that shit out. Chapter 152. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the camera with a smile plastered across his face. He was enjoying having eyes again, he could really take in the details as the heroes confidently sprung into his trap. He watched the heroes break into Kurogiri's bar, going full force for a grand total of 30 seconds before their laziness caught up to them and they sat back, starting to monologue. They gave grand speeches for some reason he couldn't comprehend. Only the winners had the right to give speeches, and the heroes didn't even have anyone in custody yet. But All Might, true to form, was proving how much of a moron he was as he ran his mouth. All for One turned down the volume of the preaching and picked through the papers left for him, idly flipping through the pages while the monologuing continued on in the background. He had 6 teleportation quirks throughout his career. 1 for Kurogiri, 1 for Yamato, and 4 for himself. Only one of the ones he kept had any decent range though, so he'd be stuck with that one. A shame it was the most limited of them. All for One walked from the computers and deeper into the basement and towards the Nomus he had selected to send to the heroes as a consolation prize. They had come close, those heroes had come so very close to getting him. He could hear the crashing above as his decoys died. No one would even notice as they returned to mutter whatever twice his quirk made those duplicate Nomus from. The heroes had only gotten so far though because he wanted them to, for you could not slit a man's throat from a mile away. All for One worked through the quirks he selected in advance for this day. Only 7, but that wasn't counting repeats or enhancers that supplemented a quirk. He'd only need 7 main abilities today, and that was being generous. He locked onto the Nomus to send out in advance as the building shook from another attack, but it didn't matter. The Nomus all had their orders well in advance as All for One called for the elevator, then took a minute to check himself out in the mirror. His face shifted back to the mashed form that All Might would remember, hiding his recovery. On top of his face he slid a large black mask with a vague skull design, the neckpiece coated in tubes to make him look more injured. He didn't want to give too much away, after all. He wore his best suit, checking it one last time as the elevator carried him up to the secret room to hide his entrance. It had been designed by Best Jeanist himself for maximum defense and comfort, and he simply could not resist the irony of killing Best Jeanist while wearing this. He was pretty sure Gang Orca was there too, and if he could have had Orca skin shoes he definitely would have, despite how childish that would be. Still, he couldn't cater to every schmuck he killed, so he was going for the classic businessman look. Black glossy shoes, custom fit suit, body armor that honestly looked good with everything, and a helmet so he didn't get sniped in the head mid-speech and look like a moron. Even a tank shell wouldn't kill him, but it definitely would hurt, and he wanted to really enjoy this next part, he wanted to savor it like a fine wine. He sealed the secret room behind him and moved forward into the mess that had once been the Nomu storage facility's first floor with a confident power strut, walking past the ruined machinery and crushed walls like he owned the place. Technically, he did, and pretty soon he'd be owning all of Japan. Something to look forward to. Ah, are these things alive? Mount Lady held up some of the duplicate Nomus, apparently disgusted. She was an egotist and a moron. Her quirk just made her bigger, she was barely stronger than Gang Orca. No threat. Is it really okay for our job to be this easy, Jeanist? Alright, that got a laugh. Best Jeanist was standing diligently though while he wrapped up the Nomu's pants, pretending to be helpful while every Nomu there could probably break free easily. They were designed to break buildings for God's sake, and here he was trying to stop them with their own damn pants. This was pretty funny from his point of view. Maybe we should have gone with All Might. Don't think about difficulty and importance together, newcomer. Riot Squad, get the maidens ready. They still might be here. Please continue to give it your all. That last line was pretty useful, especially since Mount Lady, Gang Orca, and the man in the brown maid cat thing had already been distracted by other things. Ragdoll, answer me. Is that your teammate? Looks like she's still breathing, I'm glad. Gang Orca tried to offer a little comfort while they all stood around, not noticing the new figure emerging slowly from the wreckage. He was taking his time, didn't want to get dirt on a Best Jeanist suit after all. But her condition. The brown cat thing held the girl who was wasting her quirk, the one with green hair. Seemed her name was Ragdoll. With how easily she was defeated, it was a fitting name. What did they do to you, Ragdoll? Sorry, she had such a good quirk. I couldn't help myself. The figure's steps cut clearly through the night, seeming to emit confidence from just his walk alone. She was so bad at handling it though, I felt the need to help it. Give that little quirk a better home. What was your name, again? The brown cat didn't answer, rudely, and instead peered into the darkness. Are you with the League? A light, someone. Stop. Don't move. Gang Orca held up his hand but didn't actually do a thing as the figure loomed forward, taking his time as he entered the scene and adjusted his tie, a gift from his first wife. Then Best Jeanist stopped all the inactivity and raised a hand, making all the fibers in the approaching figure's clothing tightening to try and restrain him. Some of the dumber people nearby, namely the one with the head the size of a car but still stuck with a brain the size of a pecan, questioned the hero's choice. Wait, Best Jeanist, what if he was an ordinary civilian? Think about the situation. That instant of hesitation could prove fatal in a fight. It seemed Best Jeanist had learned well over the years, especially the ass whooping he got from the incident simply known in the top of the harrowing world as the Wraith incident. Don't let the villains do anything. BZZZ ka tilde boom. It was hard to tell what exactly happened. Everything was blurry and out of focus, ears were ringing, and everything and everyone had been sent flying. When their senses did return they could make out the sound of someone clapping and laughing, mixed in with that steady pace of footsteps. As expected of the number 4 hero. And here I thought I'd be bored. He moved forward with that unfettered confidence, not petered by this surprise, but enjoying every second of it. I thought I'd blow everyone away, but to notice my actions and be able to manipulate everyone's clothes and drag them to safety, all during your own speech. That quick decision-making and skill, you must have nerves of steel. The figure stepped off the ground and into the air, floating upwards gently as he overlooked the scene. The heroes had been scattered and Best Jeanist was laying on his back. It seemed though he made the attack miss its intended target, Best Jeanist had still taken a considerable chunk of damage. But he was still kicking. Impressive. Most impressive. You have my congratulations. This, man. Best Jeanist flashed back to something mentioned before the heroes went out, back in that first meeting before the heroes split up into two groups and went to the bar in this warehouse. The words of one of the Hero Association representatives about the League's members. The League likely, no, definitely has a brain behind it. His strength is comparable to All Might's, but despite that, he is crafty and cautious. If he doesn't feel like his safety is guaranteed, he will not show himself. The Hero Association board member described this villain with as little enthusiasm as possible, but none of the heroes present could figure out what villain he was talking about. There was no one in the records matching his description. This isn't what I was told. This villain they had been told about would be hiding in the shadows, wouldn't take risks, and yet here he was, facing them down, ready to kill them all. But so what? But so what if he was? Best Jeanist forced himself up with his fibers, pushing through the pain. A top hero doesn't use that as an excuse for failure. BZZZ caught tilde boom. Yes, but they probably don't talk that much either. All for one lowered his hand and glanced around, taking in the sights and barely paying attention to the corpse he just made. Your quirk is very good, could be very useful. Material control is always nice. But this body can't take any more quirks, I'm afraid. Although, he said, tilting his head to the side as he started thinking a little harder about it, I suppose that taking the number 4 hero's quirk would weaken hero society as a whole. Decisions. Oh well, time for one of us to stick to the plan. Yes, the plan. There were few variables left, and it was time to cut them out too. He still had to secure the League's future for them and make sure All Might wouldn't miss their big appointment. All for one activated one of his teleporting quirks, homesickness, and dropped his pre-selected no moves through while pulling the League of Villains to him for their own safety, and brought Bakugo along as bait. If All Might had been dumb enough to chase the kid once, he'd probably do it twice and walk straight into the final trap. The League began to appear around him, fumbling and stagnating as they fell to the ground in confusion and disgust at the unpleasant sensation of being teleported. They were unfocused and useless. Still, they didn't need to be helpful for this next part, they just needed to get to safety. Claw. Damn it. The first one to his feet, to no one's surprise, was the only one who didn't need to be on his feet for the plan, Katsuki Bakugo. He was coughing and unstable, but he had managed to keep his feet under him and his attention sharp. All for one did consider taking his quirk, but Bakugo was so destructive that it was more likely that him becoming a professional hero would accelerate the destruction of hero society, so it was best to let Bakugo go and be free. It wasn't likely that Bakugo or Shigaraki would realize that, though, and All for one couldn't take any quirks anymore even if he wanted to. It was best to stick with the plan with as little deviation as possible until victory was secured. He looked over the League who was putting themselves back together and making quite the ruckus. They were starting to take in their surroundings while they put everything together. It was time for him to offer a little help. You failed again, Tamura. All for one walked over to Kurogiri calmly, keeping his hands in his pockets to show just how pleasant and relaxed this evening was for him. If he still smoked, he might have lit one right about now for dramatic effect as he leaned down and checked up on Kurogiri. The cheap bastard wasn't even unconscious. He had activated the pain-canceling quirk and just played dead. What an ass. Master. Shigaraki focused on him, trying to figure out what was happening. Poor kid. He didn't have the time to explain, but he had so much to say to the boy. Don't worry, Tamura. He genuinely smiled down at Shigaraki as he stopped just in front of the boy. He could see the boy's potential, shining even now. Shigaraki had much to learn but he was learning. You might not always succeed, my boy, but as long as you are willing to learn you have not failed. You'll face many problems going forward, but if you're willing, you'll become so much stronger because of them. Hasashi Midoriya no. The original Shigaraki stooped down to the one he viewed as his son, offering him a hand up. You've grown so much already. I'm very proud of you, Tamura, and honored that you'd take my name. Thank you. Hey, who's this random guy? Where are we? Everything tastes so blah. The other villains didn't realize what was happening. They couldn't, even twice didn't understand the significance of the man he met yesterday. But one did, and it showed his growth. Master, why are you phrasing it like that? The elder Shigaraki grabbed the younger by the hand, lifting him up and staring into him. The younger Shigaraki's brain spun as he began to realize what was happening. No. My quirk can only bring people to me or to others I am familiar with, so it looks like you'll have to do the next part, Kurogiri. If Kurogiri wasn't pretending to be unconscious, he would have made some joke about overtime. But in his usual sass's absence, All for one used his third quirk, forced quirk activation. His fingers extended and impaled Kurogiri, making his body convulse for a moment before forming a portal that Kurogiri slipped through. Hey, don't act so in charge here, fancy pants. A villainess shouted at him, Magna, not understanding the situation. Explain what's going on. All for one ignored that, turning instead to look ahead. You better start trying to get Bakugo through that portal. I imagine it won't be long now, Tilda. Bakugo took one look at the situation and was already running for the hills. Magna activated her quirk, pulling him straight towards her while he countered by raising both hands, firing an explosion to keep her back in build distance. Most of the villains joined the scuffle except for two, standing apart from it all. The one who knew what was to come, and the one who couldn't yet understand what was come. He refused to understand, but he'd have to. There was no other way forward. Are you going to leave me, Master? The two Shigaraki stood slightly apart from the scuffle, one in confusion while the other in solemn commitment. Yes. Instead of denying it, he focused ahead and adjusted his position. It was 5 kilometers from Kurogiri's bar to here if you skipped over the roads and buildings. All Might would be arriving soon. Why? Have I failed you? Why are you leaving me? Shigaraki's frame of mind was not large enough to understand the scope of what was happening here. Still, he could explain a little. Because a tree cannot grow beneath a tree, Tamura. All for one adjusted his helmet as he spoke cryptically, then adjusted his course. They didn't have much time left together, and he didn't want to leave the boy confused and disorientated in the world of wolves. You can only grow so much underneath me, Tamura. It is time for you to spread your wings. But I'm not ready, and need you. No, you only think you need me. The eldest Shigaraki shook his head and turned back for just a moment, smiling at the boy he raised. They didn't share blood, but in some ways, they were the closest family the other had. Odd, since one of them had several families through the century while the other had never known a single one. You will have the league beside you, helping you if you help them, Tamura. That is the basics of business. While they had been musing, Bakugo had let himself get pulled in by Magna so he could Goomba stomp on her face before launching upwards, then creating massive explosions to fly straight up. With Dabi and Kurogiri unconscious and out of the picture, no one had the range to catch the flying fireball. Not that it stopped the leaguers from trying, though. Magna grabbed Mr. Compress and Spinner and launched Compress into the air, trying to get him close enough to compress and catch Bakugo, but Bakugo easily avoided it by moving to the side as he started to rocket off into the distance. The league had, for lack of a better term, completely failed, having missed their goal and learned nothing. But that was to be expected. Now it was time for the curtain call in the last expected event. We don't have much time, Tamura, so I must make this quick. All for One checked his watch, raising what this scarred and scrapped face called an eyebrow. All Might was late. 2 months. I want to see what you can do in 2 months, and if you do well, there will be a reward. I've left an explanation for you at the hideout. I'll be sending you to with more details. Something began to cross the city, he could tell. It was like a feeling in his bones, maybe their quirks were linked or something, but he knew who was approaching. It was time to wrap this up, and there was no better way than to do it ironically. Masterio are going to fight him. But your body. Shigaraki figured out what was happening as the League of Villains barely paid attention, still moping about their failed capture of Bakugo in the background. It was time for them to go. All for One smiled as he looked towards the approaching fight, then lifted the leaguers with a telekinetic quirk and pushed them into Kurogiri's portal. Most didn't resist, most went through without a second thought, but one hung back, clinging to the past out of fear for the future. If that boy wanted to reach his full potential, he'd need to get rid of that fear. Remember, Tamura, you don't need to be afraid anymore. Master. Shigaraki tried to plant his feet and resist, but he couldn't. His master might be old, but he wasn't weak yet. He watched his heir be pushed through Kurogiri's portal, smiling in spite of the strange sense of loss that filled his chest. Even when he won, he still couldn't win everything. Why? Still, he had some parting words for the both of them. He gave Tamura Shigaraki one last smile before he slipped through the portal and put on his own biggest smile, for the boy he had been a hero to. Because I am here. And with those old and overused words, Kurogiri's portal closed and All Might arrived, shattering the scene with a shockwave as the final battle started. Chapter End Notes. Yo, this was, by far, one of the hardest chapters to write for me in the whole story. I kept trying different thing, taking different approaches, but every way I tried to crack it I hated. So I'm releasing the one I hate the least and works with the most setup. In canon, this scene is a mess. A lot of standing around talking, a lot of wasted time, it's just bad. I deplore you to go rewatch Hero Aka Season 3 Episode 10, it's amazing for all the wrong reasons in my opinion. That's why, in my version, I made the canon events a backdrop for the final conversation between Hisashi Shigaraki All for One and Tamura Shigaraki Hanzi. It's very difficult writing Season 3 for me because, to be honest, I hate most of it. I think they should have ended the season with AFO vs All Might, especially because the episode that comes right after it is monumentally stupid in my opinion. After AFO goes down, they do a housing episode as the students compare dorms with practically no mention of what just happened. Choosing what to skip, what to keep, and what to change is incredibly difficult. Most of the time I like to skip the canon evens or keep them. The hardest one to do in my opinion is to change because it requires a deep understanding of the original scene so you can tweak it to fit your world. For example, Bakugo. Bakugo in canon is saved by a group of students through a very convoluted plan. If you don't remember, Todoroki made an ice ramp, then Iida and Midoriya launched off of it while carrying Kirishima. They flew over and past Bakugo, Kirishima offered his hand, then Bakugo flew up and grabbed his hand. Then they all landed safely somehow, it's never explained but they probably should have broken their necks, but that's not the main point. In canon the group of students fly over and past Bakugo, meaning to grab Kirishima, Bakugo had to catch up to them. This means he had to go faster than them. If he could go faster than them, he could have just taken the simpler approach and left on his own. The League had no one with ranged quirks left, so they couldn't stop him. The canon event only happened for an emotional moment where Midoriya helped rescue Bakugo and to give Midoriya something to do, but as stated above, it was entirely pointless and makes Bakugo look like a moron. It undercuts the emotional moment by making it seem stupid. In my experience people cannot relate to stupid things. They can relate to bad decisions and stupid people, but not stupid things. Being blinded by emotion to make a bad call is relatable and understandable, a character forgetting his favorite type of movement and that he could just fly away from the fight is stupid and annoying, and for me, Hero Aka's third season is just a string of stupid things. That's what makes writing these chapters so hard for me. Do I keep the bad decisions of canon, do I skip over them and just put it in the background, or do I try to get my hands dirty and fix it so it makes sense? I didn't change the hero's raid plan, otherwise, Endeavor and Best Jeanist would have switched places. If I do change things, how much do I change? I reworked All for One's entire final speech to Shigaraki because in canon it's pretty stupid. He tells Shigaraki he'll be there to always help him, then in the very next fight he gets sent to jail leaving Shigaraki alone with no direct help. This has been rough, but hopefully it'll be better since we're getting into a fight, my favorite parts of this story. Hope this tirade made sense, but I'm tired. I'm bailing now. Adios. Edit and post. OG music made private, link here in case it's ever open again. Chapter 153, The War. Chapter Summary. A low detailed mess as everything comes crashing down. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. All Might fell through the air like a thunderbolt, shattering the ground and sending everything nearby flying backward with his first attack. The heroes, the rebel, everything flew backward. Except for a single person, a lone figure who caught All Might's attack as if it was a ball. They were face to face and just inches apart for a moment before All for One activated telekinesis and super strength to launch All Might backward. A moment of silence as they locked gazes. No words, just stares as they felt each other out. It had been a long time coming for both of them. All Might had managed to hold on to the quirk for 40 years, longer than even the original All for All had managed. He had come to carry the hopes of this little island, and those hopes weren't light. That weight could be felt in his attacks, in his desperation that made him so dangerous. All for One had destroyed countless heroes like a mountain breaking the waves of an ocean. It seemed effortless, but he was becoming weathered with time and his body showed it, which was likely why he was hiding behind such a complicated mask. Still, not all of that strength was gone. Not yet. Their moment of silence then passed as they collided again. A moment, as long as it could feel, was there and gone in an instant, and their instant was gone. All Might closed the distance between them with short but quick steps, then dished out a barrage of punches while All for One built distance and sidestepped, forcing All Might to follow All for One's lead as they snaked through the debris of buildings and roads. All Might pushed himself faster and faster, but all he could do was get closer and closer without getting any purchase on the villain's frame. Echoes of their last fight rang through his head as he chased. It was like the carrot on the stick. Beating this one villain right now felt like the most important moment of his life after the thousands of crimes and wrongdoings he'd done, and it very well could be the most important moment if he could just get close enough. But he couldn't. He couldn't close the distance, he couldn't get the purchase, and he couldn't get the carrot that danced so nimbly between his fingers. All for One was, for the first time in one of his many fights with One for All, the one to break the silence first. All Might, time hasn't been treating you well. Shut up, villain. Where are the boy you kidnapped in the league? What have you done with them? All for One got a laugh out of that, slipping out from in front of All Might and completely out of sight. It wasn't until a hand gently pressed into the back of All Might's head with the casual air of old friends that his eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. Bzzz ka tilde boom. Impressive. That attack did your stomach out last time, so I thought I'd just go for the head to see if I could get you in one. All for One's hand now pointed to the sky instead of the back of All Might's skull. All Might had spun around, striking the arm and knocking it to the side while he went for All for One's body. All for One had, in turn, avoided the blow by using his own shot to move backward. All Might hadn't managed to get any good hits in, but he had managed to make All for One miss entirely. Instead of either blowing All Might's head to pieces or tearing apart the city, All for One had only punched a nice little hole in the clouds. Look nice, but that wasn't what he was here to do. You're a lot weaker than last time, All for One. It seems time hasn't been kind to either of you. All Might pressed back on the attack, but he did notice a reaction to that one-liner. As much as All for One wouldn't say, his actions had spoken for him. All for One was definitely slower than the last time they fought, and his quirks were weaker. They both had become imitations of their former selves, just trying to scrape enough power up to stand proud and look good. This would be a fight to see who was closer to their former selves, who had scrapped enough power together to stand up more than the other guy. All Might grit his teeth before he dove in fully, immersing himself in another punch-out. All for One didn't even try to meet All Might's punches again and instead moved around like a leaf in the wind, weaving and ducking between the blows. For what it's worth, All Might, I think getting weaker might have made you a better fighter. You don't look like you're trying to break your thumbs with every punch anymore. Of course, I need to be in top condition when I beat you. Couldn't break a thumb before then. All Might and All for One sure looked impressive from the outside. A display of strength that would instantly kill most people, it hit against a show of control and speed that could outpace practically every hero who ever walked. But for the insiders, even All for One acknowledged that this really wasn't a great performance, even from him. He was having to make wide, large dodges instead of his preferred close-quarter deflects and parries. All for One liked to fight one of two ways, either as a blip in the distance you weren't even aware of or so close he could see the exact moment his opponents realized all hope was gone. Now, though, he was being buffeted by the winds from All Might's punches though and was being pushed back almost as much as he was retreating, showing this body's weaknesses. He had limited himself for this, but he still had limits. That was the problem with being human. There would always be walls, always be struggles. But he could overcome those limits. That was the great thing about being human. He'd overcome them before, and he didn't plan to stop now. They crashed again as the sea against lightning. Two very different kinds of pure power pitted against one another, destroying everything as they rapidly approached their limits. But instead of seeming to get more serious and immersed in their scuffle as they edged closer and closer to the knife's edge, they began to loosen up and started talking. Bakugo flew off a long time ago, and the league was removed to a safe location. You don't need to worry about them. This took All Might by surprise. All for One never helped him before, so, why are you telling me this, All for One? Are you giving up already? You think I'm giving up just because of that? All for One this time pointed his attack straight down and blew everything away with a shockwave. His preparations were almost finished, he just needed that little insect in yellow to show up well, need was a strong word. He wanted that little buzzing bee here, but he needed to remember there was a difference between what was necessary and what was reasonable. I just wanted to get your mind focused. After all, you should be worrying about yourself. All Might didn't even try to dodge this wide area attack and just weathered through it, advancing through the heavy winds and going straight for All for One while the villain kept talking. I've done a lot of preparation for this moment, after all, and I really wanted to tell someone about it. And who better than you? I'm sure your cellmates would be delighted to hear it. All Might had to dodge again as All for One got more into it, actively attacking and taking back the initiative. I've fought so many One for All users, but you are special. All for One smirked as he jumped back, watching as the ground where he'd just been shattered like glass before All Might caught back up with him. You are definitely special, for being the weakest One for All user I've ever seen. What? That took All Might by surprise. Not anger, not rage, just pure confusion as to what on earth All for One was talking about. He wasn't a genius, but even he knew that he was the strongest hero in the world. He could lift tons with one arm, but he was the weakest One for All user. He'd seen Nana Shimura fight, and while she had been strong, he was definitely stronger than her. That was how the quirk worked, every generation was stronger than the last. All for One noticed his confusion and laughed, raising both hands this time and offsetting his blasts, firing one then the other to increase his attack speed. Not in strength, All Might, in power. I've been killed by a lot of people and a lot of things, but you. All for One almost had to stop to breathe, it was so funny. You do know that Nana Shimura could use 3 quirks, right? Her body had to handle the stress of 8, but at her peak, she could use 3. You, on the other hand, could only ever use 1 and use it badly at that. You never wondered why. All Might was genuinely thinking about this because this wasn't just a goad. It was a real question that All for One had thought over for years, wondering why a quirk was failing to do its fundamental purpose. This was a big question for quirk science and could be a nuisance if it ever came up in his own Nomus. While some of the later users didn't get all of the quirks hidden inside One for All, none of them had it as bad as All Might. But he had eventually come to his own answer. It's your quirk use. You are so bad with your one quirk that you in the 40 years you've had it never unlocked One for All's other quirks. There was no harm in telling All Might now because, in all honesty, there were only 3 good quirks All Might could unlock and he'd have no idea how to use them at first. Plus, this plan had been created accounting for if All Might suddenly unlocked the other 6 quirks and used all of them perfectly. Not only did you fail to use a single quirk you were given for free correctly, but you also did the worst job fighting me. The first one for all killed me 5 times. The second and third killed me 4. Every other user killed me once. Except you. They weren't moving at high speed anymore as All for One drilled home how much of a fuck up All Might really was. The only time you managed to kill me was when I deliberately baited you into it. Didn't you ever notice how weak I was the last time we fought? The weak quirks I brought. I had brought quirks along not to kill you. They were to fake my death so that no one would look for me and I could finish my business in secret. All for One got a laugh as All Might figured out that he was just a pawn in All for One's scheme. That look of confusion slipping into slow realization really was golden. Or maybe he was realizing something else, that this fight seemed to have a lot in common with that last fight. So then, what's your game? You're using the same quirks as the last time we fought, but I doubt you intend to fake your death after you just told me that. You seem to be coming clean with a lot of things today. Of course I am. This is just tying off the loose ends. This is goodbye, All Might. All for One laughed, as he gestured around him. It's over, I've won, and the last thing I need to do is watch you figure it out in person. A lot of big talk from a guy WHO hasn't landed a single hit yet. All Might proved All for One right as he dove in going for a hit on the supervillain. But this time, something was different. All for One didn't dodge. He stood there, smiling as All Might rocketed forward. You still don't get it, All Might. Well. There was a crash that echoed across the entire city as All Might's fists finally made contact. His charging assault had been caught barehanded just a few feet before he could hit All for One, sliding to a stop just in front of the villain. Toshinori blinked, trying to process who or what he was looking at. His hands had both been caught by a tall woman with flowing black hair who had locked gazes with him, smiling confidently as she tested her strength against his. She wore a jumpsuit that he hadn't seen in a long time, and an expression that he thought he'd only get to see again in his memories. It was impossible. It was inconceivable. It was absurd. Master. Nana Shimura pummeled Toshinori as he tried to move forward, catching him off guard and sending him flying backward into the rubble and away from the villain, before finally rising to her full height triumphantly as All for One finished his sentence. I believe she'll be glad to help you figure things out. Right, Shimura. Nana Shimura didn't speak with words, she didn't need to. She stood confidently, the pillar that Toshinori had based his own image off of. She seemed to smile down at him despite their height difference as she got into a fighting pose. The 7th user of One for All faced the 8th with unspoken confidence, and Toshinori was shuddering. He almost dropped his hero form from shock as he tried to process what was going on in front of him. An illusion. A trick. What is this, some sort of duplicate or replica? It took quite a few tries to capture one of you, but this moment was worth it. All for One smiled, clapping with excitement like a businessman seeing his stock skyrocket. You should know I wouldn't settle for anything less than the real deal, and that this is definitely the original. Impossible. Toshinori pulled himself back together with rage, stepping in for a full-strength punch. But something inside him faltered as he looked at this ghastly image, as he tried to punch the person who taught him everything he knew. While his own arms failed him, the reflection from his past had no such hesitations and met his punch with her own, seeming to distort reality itself as the two forces clashed before launching them off in separate directions. They clashed again and again, but confusion turned to horror at the oddly familiar fighting style. The way she laughed as she exchanged punches with him. And worst of all, her smile. These were things that Toshinori believed to be irreplaceable and things that All for One could never replicate. But here they were. His own master smiled as she fought him, locking their feet in place and exchanging punches with earth-shattering force while All for One monologued on in the background. There had to be changes, of course. She was losing One for All just like you are now when I first acquired her, and that was years ago. Plus, in the strength category, you edged her out. Couldn't have that, now could I? You should get to see your dear old master in top form. Toshinori and Shimura slammed into each other again and again, and something had to give. Whether it was from fear, confusion, or from the new quirks put into her, Shimura pushed past Toshinori's blows and lobbed him into another building, much like he had once done to a Nomu inside the USJ. He didn't come out of the rubble instantly, trying to process what was happening. His body might be quick, but his mind was still playing catch-up. What was happening was inconceivable, it was impossible. But it was still happening regardless. What did you do, All for One? Toshinori screamed as he hurtled from the building, going straight for the villain in question. Once again Shimura interposed herself, blocking his attempt before hitting him back in a way while the villain continued to talk in the background. Great question, glad you asked. All for One was genuinely delighted now. It took a lot of work to repair the physical damages, but now Shimura should be back in top form. I've given her strength to rival yours, because let's be honest. She's the one who set you up to die. All for One got a little somber as he reflected on his memories and rage. She couldn't beat me, so she chose another person to die for another pointless war. Just like he did, and just like you did with Mirio. All for One scoffed as Toshinori flared back to life at his provocation, trying for a third time but getting struck out. His charge was again intercepted by Shimura, smiling confidently just before they crashed into each other at full force. Did you think I wouldn't notice the boy? I've been planning this moment for half a century before you were even born. Nothing escapes me. Still, this entire concept was idiotic to begin with. All for One took a moment to drop the theatrics, sitting down on his own telekinesis as his darker tones continued. One for All could be powerful. If it wasn't filled with wasteful quirks and used by morons. Smokescreen. Float. How many concussions did they have when they picked airs? All for One took quirks very seriously, and the way One for All wasted their quirks pissed him off. It was probably one of the big reasons he hated All Might so much and designed this exact moment for him. Those quirks could be powerful in the right hands, but when stuck with morons like you they're also just incomplete versions of real quirks. Poison gas and flight, for example, aren't rare quirks. There's thousands of different poison gas quirks and probably even more methods of flight and they chose the method so weak it barely counts. Shimura and Toshinori exchanged blows, not quite listening to the speech in the background. It made sense, one of them had their entire world crumbling around them by the second. Shimura stopped their exchange to grab Toshinori's arm and slam their heads together, creating a shockwave and forcing both a step back. Pathetic. How fitting for you. All for One's smile grew with every blow that landed on All Might. But it should be getting better. Do you hear that? A little yellow gnat, buzzing about. Toshinori didn't get it at first, but it didn't take a second to realize. Something was coming forward, leaping through the rubble. A small figure clad in yellow and tan jumped forward. Toshinori, you dumbass. Stop standing around and attack. My god. Gran Torino arrived on the scene and stopped for a second to take in the chaos unfolding before him. Shimura and Toshinori exchanged looks in the moment of silence before Shimura bolted forward, going straight for Torino's neck. Now it was Toshinori's turn to interpose himself, grabbing Shimura by her cape and trying to pull her back. However, instead of getting the reaction he wanted, the cape tore off easily as she hurtled forward and slammed a fist into Torino, sending him flying like a baseball just before Toshinori could catch up and grab Shimura a step too late. Torino. Toshinori was torn, confused, and disorientated. His brain couldn't process anything that was happening. This all seemed like madness to him. It was going fast. It was going way too fast. As much as I hate, whatever that guy's name was, I think this should proceed without interrupts, don't you? Toshinori raised a hand as the ground began to shake, then the first Nomus tore through what was left of the road. Dozens of Nomus tore through the ground, screaming and raving as they began to attack everything in sight. While none attacked all for one, some even went for Shimura but she brushed them off like flies. She smiled as her eyes locked onto Toshinori's, daring him to look in what had become of his master before they re-entered their chaotic dance. Rampant destruction filled the city. Heroes from everywhere were getting called in for what must have surely seemed like the apocalypse. Monsters tore through the night as havoc spread like wildfire, buildings toppled and collapsed from the fighting, screams filled the air to drown out the thunderous crashing of fists, and in the midst of it all the devil sat, smiling beneath his mask as he watched the chaos. It was all coming together. Chapter end notes. Yo, short chapter for a long wait. Getting all for one speech and Shimura's entrance was definitely the hardest parts of this mess, but I think it lends to what's supposed to be happening in the chapter. This isn't some grand fight, this isn't some amazing last stand, it's a fucking mess as the Hero Association fucks up for the last time. Everything, and I do mean everything, is going horribly wrong. Lots of people are dead this time because, unlike in the original, All For One uses his Nomu correctly, as a distraction to force the other heroes to stay out of his business. In canon, he just sends some Nomus to Kurogiri's bar and that's the last of them, instead of using more of them to cause chaos across the city and spread the problem out. One thing I quickly wanted to point out just to eliminate confusion, All For One says Nana Shimura was losing one for all like All Might is, and he means she was losing access to the quirks, something that I think happens with time in canon if the user lives long enough after they pass on one for all. Shimura was losing the ability to use one for all's quirks after handing it off to Yagi Toshinori. She did not have a skinny or muscle form like All Might has. Just wanted to clear that up in case anyone asked. It's not great, it's not focused, but I wanted to talk about a big problem with writing this part of the story, focus. This fight, once I got into it, was very fun to write because it harkens back to something I haven't done in a long time, the protagonist less Pav. No one hears the actual Pav so we get peeks inside everyone's heads as the fight shifts, and hopefully you can tell whose head you're in at that particular time. I think this style is fun for fights but it makes writing plot very difficult, which is why there was such a slow build up to this mess. I'm gonna get to work chopping it up and making it make more sense, but I'm not sure I want to lose all the chaos and jumble this chapter has. I probably should, but life's made for making mistakes and I'm just getting started. See y'all soon. Chapter 154, Nana Shimura. Chapter summary. An inglorious beatdown. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Toshinori slid to a stop, then lurched to the side as Shimura plowed through where he'd just been standing with crushing force. The ground shattered beneath her as she rebounded up, jumping from the floor to what was left of a nearby wall before diving back at him for another attack. There was no guarding as they clashed. No defense, no clever tactics, just two juggernauts ramming into each other. Toshinori planted his feet and raised his fists while Shimura charged in recklessly, smiling as she slammed into him straight on. Toshinori was forced back a step as hand collided with hand, every punch with enough power to be an earth-shattering impact. Even the missed shots created massive gusts that swept across the scenery, throwing rubble into the wind. Toshinori was completely lost as Shimura smiled, bearing down on him from every direction with the very fighting style she had taught him. She seemed so alive as she bore down on him, forcing him back step by step. Master, Toshinori took a deep breath as Shimura got a clean hit on his stomach and he slid backward, forced to reset his position. He replanted his feet as he clenched his jaw, staring down the figure before him. She had a casual smile as she approached, taking her time. She seemed very relaxed by her posture, but her eyes, they seemed dead, unfocused and hazy as if she was staring straight past him. All for one, he had crossed the line. All Might spit blood out and re-entered the brawl, throwing it all into his punches. All for one dared to do such dishonor to his master. In the name of All Might, for the honor and family of Nana Shimura, he could not let this be her legacy. He'd defeat her now. The news chopper flew overhead as the two titans clashed. Someone would undoubtedly eventually recognize Nana Shimura, further damaging Hero Society as the former number 5 hero came back from the dead and beat their new number 1 to death. She was wearing her Sunday best after all, but right now all anyone could make out was All Might exchanging blows with some villain while a man in a sharp suit watched over it all. Their punches were so strong they shook the helicopter flying well above them with the wind. Al for one had been half tempted to shoot the chopper down for fun, but it sent a better message if the world could see what Nana Shimura and, by proxy, he was capable of. If she managed to kill All Might, she would likely still be retired after this fight. As powerful and useful as she had been, this was her purpose. She might get reused later, but this single fight was why she had been made. She had been designed from the ground up to mimic and crush All Might. But if she couldn't manage to kill All Might, All for one had accounted for that, and while his current quirks were more designed for watching and enjoying, he still could finish off All Might himself. Everything was accounted for. All Might and Shimura would weaken each other, and All for one could play with whoever was left. The Nomus built a curtain preventing any other heroes from coming in. It was a double-layered strategy as well. The Nomus prevented All Might and Nana from getting too far away, while All Might and Nana's full power didn't let the heroes get close. This was what was known as a backup plan, and if the Hero Association knew what one of those was, this whole incident would have been much harder to pull off. Still, All for one took in the sights with Ragdoll's quirk, Search. He monitored the Nomus, the heroes, and of course the position of the news chopper. This was his masterpiece, after all, and he wanted to make sure it looked stunning when people looked back centuries later to the start of the end of heroism. All Might grabbed Shimura by the arm and flipped her into the air to build momentum before slamming her into the ground, partially burying her in the trashed road. This helped negate her usual floaty style of fighting and made her an easy target as All Might unleashed a barrage of punches on his now trapped opponent. From within the crater in the ground, Shimura forced him back by kicking him with both legs in the stomach, launching All Might upwards and backward before breaking herself free of the ground, then tackling All Might out of the air. They flew through the sky before crashing into the ground again. Now All Might was pinned while Shimura attacked, smiling wide as she threw out punch after punch. All Might turtled up, blocking instead of dodging as the hits rained down. Shimura's hits were fast and hard to predict, making them hard to dodge, but they lacked weight. She tended to pull them back too quickly, and that was something All Might could exploit. All Might weathered through Shimura's barrage. Shimura laughed and laughed, showing off her confidence, but her hits began to slow down. Then, for a brief moment, they paused. Shimura had run out of breath and needed to take more air into her system, giving All Might a window to attack. Not that either of them understood any of this, but All Might didn't need to understand it to take advantage of it. He burst forward and countered her last attack, striking her once in the stomach with enough force to knock a man's skull clean off. Shimura's head was forced down as the air was forced out of her, launching her backward with this single solid hit. She flew through the air before her legs messily touched and dragged along the ground, sending her into a spin before she finally stopped by face planting into the ground, sliding along the asphalt for a few more feet before she stood, smiling as she let the blood drip off her face with her usual confidence. Toshinori hung back for a second as he stared at the bloody image of his master, haunted by ghosts he was seeing. His punches didn't feel right. This whole thing didn't feel right. It was tearing him apart inside to do this. But he had to. All Might grit his teeth and jumped forward, screaming as he let his fists do the talking. He wasn't sure if he could say anything to his master anymore, not after this shameful display. Isn't it amazing, All Might? It only took 30 strength-enhancing quirks, and she's already as strong as you. All for One weighed in on this shameful display, making sure All Might couldn't regain his bearings. In fact, strength-enhancing quirks are the most common quirks in the world. It's a side effect of millions of other quirks these days. All for One floated above the conflict, deciding now was a great time to give All Might another target and distract him. He floated down and landed just beyond Shimura as he spoke. No matter how many generations you wait, no matter how long it takes, One for All will never grow faster than All for One. You will always be playing catch up to me, and nothing you do can ever change that. I can gain 100 quirks in a day. It took only 12 years to make Nana Shimura into this beauty. All for One stepped up his game on pissing off All Might, making sure that the moron would take the bait as he walked forward and touched some of Shimura's hair. Someone had used honey shampoo on her hair. Weird choice, hard to get these days, but ultimately irrelevant. How long did it take for One for All to get to this level again? All for OOOOONE. And once again, All Might proved he learned nothing as he tried to push past Shimura and hit All for One. Unlike All Might's attempt to stop Shimura from punching Gran Torino, Shimura interposed herself again and caught All Might by his arm instead of by his cape. She pulled him off course and lobbed him away, scoring another free hit while All for One took a step back to make sure nothing hit him. All for One isn't a measure of time, All Might. I asked how long it took for One for All to get to the level where I could beat you so effortlessly. All for One laughed as he stood up straight, putting a hand to his head as if to shield his eyes as he peered out. I could always beat One for All, but it's never been so easy before. Do you know why that is, All Might? All Might sprung from the ground and crashed into Shimura again, entering another exchange of punches. I guess even you don't know why. A shame, All Might. Hell, your entire career is a shame. Your master, who died to protect the world, is going to destroy the world as my right hand when she's done killing you. She already killed your mentor. Wait. All Might didn't hear that last part as All for One turned, completely confused as he used Ragdoll Surge to lock onto one of the figures moving through the chaos with inhumane speed as he jumped through the air. He really was some kind of insect, probably a cockroach. How the fuck is that old bastard alive? Questions for later. All Might didn't notice a damn thing though as he and Shimura grabbed each other, slamming their heads together and locking eyes. He was completely captivated by the sight in front of him, and who could blame him? Shimura looked better than ever and all it took was getting eviscerated from the inside out. Sure, it had been difficult piecing her body back together after he stuck his hand inside of her and fired off several fire, ice, and electric quirks all at full power, but this was worth the effort. She was smiling as widely as ever and was still fighting as good as ever, most likely because she wasn't a proper Nomu. He had taken a great deal of effort to make sure something had been preserved, and preserving it had been what had taken 11 years. Her mind. Nana Shimura was fully thinking as she fought with All Might, planning in real time. She had orders, but she didn't need to be ordered on what to do. The first Senshin Nomu could only be one of his rivals, it was a matter of pride at this point. The revelation on how to do this had come with the creation of possessed items. By injecting a quirk into an inanimate object you could avoid any mental strain. This normally meant you couldn't use anything currently alive. But Nana Shimura had been sliding between life and death in the time, her body stuck just a moment from giving out and frozen in time by All for One's pause quirk. This was why she only had passive quirks. They had removed her brain and placed the quirks into her inanimate body, letting them reshape her. It was why she could hold about 50 quirks at once at the moment without a single drawback. 30 quirks focused on strength enhancing, 12 on defense, 6 on speed, and the remaining were miscellaneous improvements. He had used a few that made her body lighter to let her use her old fighting style, imitating float, just because he was running out of useful quirks to actually give her. He didn't want her to be stronger than All Might after all, this was supposed to be a close fight so he could kill either at a drop of the hat. And now, those 50-odd quirks shown. This new passive Nomu model showed no sign of cognitive slowing, but to be fair, it wasn't exactly easy to tell. Shimura had always been barely brighter than All Might. One for All wasn't exactly a lineage filled with geniuses, otherwise, they'd realize how pointless fighting him was. All for One watched the field test with pride. Shimura was proving to be a great success across the board. Now, though, it looked like they were coming to the end. All for One paid careful attention to the final moments of this experiment, excited. This was going to be fun to watch. All Might could feel his limits rapidly approaching as he exchanged punches. He normally wouldn't be running out of time, they'd only been fighting for about 14 minutes, but the constant battering he had been taking was draining his energy. This wasn't his time limit getting shorter, it was just a difference in scale from this fight compared to what he normally did in this form. He had to go full strength constantly just to keep up, and All Might suspected that was the point. All for One was aiming to drain then kill All Might as gruesomely as possible. Shimura smiled again with her dead eyes before stepping up and going toe-to-toe with him again. His arms felt heavy as she pressed down on him, battering him into the ground with a variety of strikes. His feet slid backward as he tried to hold his own, but he couldn't get his whole body into it. Something was holding him back from going all out. Shimura didn't have any such limitations as she twisted him suddenly to one side, flipping him off the ground before kicking him away. He rolled to a stop and glared up, staring down the monster that caused all of this. All for One was watching to the side now, smiling as he spoke. You know, All Might, I couldn't leave Japan until I saw the end of this. I just needed a little closure. Soon the removal of One for All will be complete. How thoughtful. I'm glad you care about me so much. All Might rushed to one side, dodging Shimura's next attack as she jumped down to try and crush him and countering with his own punch, striking her in the stomach and launching her straight up. He could feel the energy being sapped from his body as stood, beginning to give off steam as All for One spoke again with a much more ominous message. I do not just scare you, All Might. Or did you forget? There were hints of mocking in All for One's tone as held a hand in front of where his mouth would be as if All Might's actions were appalling to him. I said one for all, and last I checked. You're not the only one for all user anymore, right? Toshinori took a breath in as the shock hit him, remembering something that All for One had said earlier. He had quickly forgotten in the confusion, but Mirio. All for One knew about Mirio. I'm going to remove all traces of one for all once you're dead, All Might. All for One leaned forward to taunt All Might, beckoning All Might to come closer. Shimura was in the air, unable to change her direction in time. There were no obstacles this time. All Might grit his teeth as he lunged straight at the villain, pulling back one hand for a massive punch straight into the villain's skull. All for One. He didn't see All for One finish charging his quirks, or notice as All for One pointed his arm straight at All Might. Goodbye, one for all. BZZZ ka tilde boom. Chapter end notes. Yo yo yigati yo, fast chapter about the ass whooping off All Might. Fun times, good times, got a little more into detail between the two. Short chapter, written quick, mucho fast so I don't get diverted. Next chapter's gonna be longer. I gotta put something here because it's my contractual obligation to myself before I bail though. This chapter was basically entirely made so I could put a fight in somewhere. Obviously, this whole last encounter is a fight, but I wanted some moments of All Might fighting Gal Might to show just how similar they are. It's where I think All Might got his no-defense fighting style. Also, I have no clue what Nanashimura's actual hero name was. Still, this chapter's really short. I'd feel bad, but I'm too busy not doing work. Sorry, this one just had a great ending spot and the next one's gonna be longer, I promise. Chapter 155, The Revenant. Chapter summary. Revenant, a person who has returned, especially supposedly from the dead, one that returns after death or a long absence. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. BZZZ ka tilde boom. From a single shot from All for One, All Might was torn apart, launched backward as the last of his energy was torn from his crumbling form. His hero form was entirely dispelled in one single attack as he was launched backward, taking the shot with his entire body as he smashed through the remnants of the city before crashing to the ground. All Might. No, he wasn't All Might right now. Toshinori rolled to a stop, breathing slowly as he completely descended into his smaller, bonier form. Above him, the news chopper that he tried to protect zoomed back over to place its camera on him. As much as Toshinori tried to protect people, as he lay on the ground in immense pain, he really wished those idiots would get out of here before All for One decided to take a second shot. Toshinori breathed slowly, putting his arms underneath him as blood gushed from his mouth. His entire body coursed with pain and he could really feel the impact of All for One's attack. All for One might have gotten weaker, but he just proved that it hardly mattered. While the shot wasn't strong enough to kill Toshinori, he was knocked out of his hero form, and he wasn't getting that back for a while, if he could still assume hero form after this. Toshinori spat the last of the blood out as he switched from his elbows to his hands, forcing himself up a little more as he took the sights in. All for One stood back, clapping and laughing. Predictable, to the very end. So, very. All for One's clapping slowed as he leaned forward, chuckling. Predictable. Next to him, Nanashimura stood. A pillar, everything he wanted to be, corrupted and tarnished by All for One. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. She hadn't even been given a clean ending, stuck somewhere between a Nomu and death. All for One mentioned 30 strengthening quirks and even All Might could tell that was way more than a normal person could handle. Her body would probably be breaking down rapidly. She had returned from death to suffer an even worse fate, and here he was, lying on the ground and bleeding like a pig, unable to do a thing. No. No, he wasn't done. Not yet. Toshinori forced his legs underneath of him, wiping his mouth on an arm and checking all the blood. Not a good sign as he crawled up to one knee and one leg. I'm glad I got to see this in person. You know, I had a lot to say and even more to do, but this. He could hear All for One snicker as the villain took the scene in. This was worth it. Toshinori got his other leg under him and spit one final time, wiping the last of the blood from his mouth. No more was coming out at least, for better or for worse. Shimura walked forward with her usual unspoken confidence. She wanted him to carry on her dream once, but now, she was just another puppet in All for One's hands. Would the same fate await him? Would it await Mirio? These thoughts helped All Might stand up fully, glaring them both down. I'm not dead yet, All for One. His voice wasn't as loud as before, but there was a quiet determination in his words. He wasn't just fighting for Nanashimura's memory, or because he was the #1 hero. He was fighting because he needed to protect the world from All for One. That's why he was the #1 hero. So you aren't, All Might, so you aren't. Yet. Nanashimura rushed him. He didn't have the strength to exchange barges again. The few embers of one for all left in him couldn't stand another head-on assault like that. So he wouldn't try to meet her. As Shimura rushed forward to finish him off, All Might also rushed forward to meet her. He pumped the remaining power he could feel into his legs before tackling this insult to his master with his entire body, taking her with his shoulder and reversing her momentum as he shoved her along the ground, wrapping his arms around her to make sure she couldn't escape. While the energy in him couldn't take much more punishment, it was his own body that had this incredible durability after 40 years of training and fighting. His bones wouldn't break from something as weak as this. He had trained his body to deal with the shock of using one for all at almost full power, but his new weaker form couldn't handle one for all's full force. That was the kind of usage that cut his time short, but still, hardly anything even All for One could take on one for all's full strength. And he was betting Nanashimura had the same problem, even if her strength was only proportional to one for all's. That's why he went for a tackle, a move that banked on his own durability. Shimura had never been as good at taking hits as him, and he was banking on the fact that she likely wasn't used to all the quirks in her body. If he could force her to overuse them, he could have her self-destruct just like he had. They crashed into the ground, dragging Shimura through the rubble before All Might broke off the tackle and as Shimura tried to hit back. She counterattacked with a punch that Toshinori couldn't dodge, but he could negate. Her punch struck the #1 hero in the side as he jumped back, but it couldn't do any serious harm as he pulled away to negate some of the force. It instead pushed him back and helped him build better distance, giving him a chance to breathe and think. She was almost as strong as him now, yes, but not as strong as him at full power. She was either holding back or not made as strong as she should have been, and both played to his plan. After that single tackle, he let the power run through his body again, saving the power for an important occasion. How many more times could he do that? 12, maybe 15 times at best, if and only if he didn't take any bad hits. 15 more serious blows. He'd have to end a fight that already exchanged thousands of attacks in 15 hits to take down 2 of the strongest people in Japan. All Might smiled. It seemed impossible, but heroes were the ones who made the impossible possible. Nana Shimura got up, barely scratched from that attack and smiling, but now All Might met her smile. They exchanged glances, looking each other over for just a second before Shimura moved again. She moved in a straight line towards him, charging without a care for the consequences. It was the same fighting style he used, so he could at least tell what was coming even if his body couldn't react in time without the help of One for All. Shimura went in for a haymaker, throwing her right hand back to build up as much power as possible before stepping in, planting her feet to get a good base. It was this moment when she planted her feet that All Might was waiting for, because the moment she tried to throw her haymaker was the moment she had to stop moving. She put all her weight into the attack, throwing herself forward as her fist rocketed down. It was enough strength to crush a man flat if it hit, and even All Might's durability would struggle with it, so he avoided it. All Might didn't bother trying to take that attack and instead mimicked All for One of all people, stepping forward with Shimura and then ducking to the side as Shimura threw her haymaker. Shimura's haymaker tore through the air so fast it made a sonic boom, shattering the ground where he had been standing while blowing him back, but he wouldn't go back. Shimura looked up from her missed punch right as All Might countered with his own haymaker, taking advantage of the time she spent just standing around to land his own earth-shattering punch. His arm was fully beefed up as it connected with Shimura's skull. Shimura barely began to pull back as the punch connected, hammering into her face and launching her backward and into the ground, encasing her in rubble once again as All Might started to get his bearings. All Might backed away after damaging Nana Shimura, leaving her to swing wildly and miss everything. This was unexpected, which was funny, because it was happening right after All for One said all that stuff about how predictable All Might was. All Might's new fighting style was very un-All Might-ish. Instead of trying to get his own flow going, All Might was choosing to stop and start randomly to disrupt his opponent's flow. Which was how All for One fought. All for One was really enjoying watching this fight. All Might forced to such a pitiful state, using a style he was completely unfamiliar with. Funnier still, it was working. All Might had, by complete accident, found Nana's weak point. Nana Shimura as a Nomu got little to no mental feedback from her quirks since they were all passive. But the possessed weapons she was designed after had a weakness too. Energy. Shimura was slowly starting to wind down as she got tired, even if no one else noticed. Her body didn't have the energy to go forever at full blast, but she had been pushing herself to full power from the start. She was an experimental design after all, and All for One could retrieve the quirks from her corpse. No harm in testing the limits, especially if it wound up breaking her. Still, this sight was enjoyable even if unexpected. Unexpected didn't mean unpredicted, it meant unlikely, but All for One planned for all options. This just meant he'd be doing some fighting himself when they were done brawling, finishing off All Might with a few shots. All for One gave some more orders to the Nomus, giving a little extra attention to the pace that they were being killed at. It was fast, but it wasn't as fast as he had predicted. The heroes, for all their struggling, were falling behind. Even what All Might was doing now could only be considered struggling. He was just trying to last a little longer by spacing out his quirk usage, but it was far too late. Even if All Might took out the currently breaking Shimura, he'd then have to fight All for One, and All for One did a quick check over himself. Arms, legs, body, head, no, he was still in top condition. He actually regained all the energy spent firing the shots earlier, so he was at full power again. It was safe to say All Might's little struggling tactics wouldn't work twice. All for One was now confident in the outcome. Nana Shimura would implode, All Might would kill her in her moment of self-inflicted weakness, then All for One would come in and sweep. Even now, All for One could kill both of them in a heartbeat. He was much faster than either one, and he made sure that Shimura was less durable so he could kill her in one shot. It was why she had so few durability quirks compared to her strength-enhancing ones. All Might had, by complete accident, stumbled into her designed weakness. She was designed to implode, created with a self-destruction button so that she'd clean up his mess for All for One. 30 quirks to enhance strength while only 12 to enhance durability. It wasn't even two-tune. Either she'd run out of energy and be his for the pickings or she'd outright kill herself, going for a punch only to snap her own spine or something similar. He had designed this one with such a glaring weak point in case she got free. This way, even if she tried to turn against him, she couldn't. All for One had read the Evil Overlord guide and he was at least smart enough not to design a weapon stronger than him. Hasashi stopped focusing on the fight and instead asked a question through an earpiece in his helmet, talking again to his favorite pain in the ass and the world's worst actor. How's the hospital? It's fine, sir. You're not that close to Musudafu. Kurogiri spoke to him through the intercom, unafraid anyone would find this channel. It's 10 minutes away by the nearest train, and they're not even closing the trains there so they can continue evacuations. Your Nomus aren't even close, sir. Let your worries rest. Excellent. Hasashi's final worry was very unfounded, but he wanted to make sure he had nothing to worry about. Just one more thing to check off, just in case. He couldn't forgive himself if he let something terrible happen like this. Midoriya should be waking up soon. Maybe he was already awake. Hasashi glanced up at the news chopper that Midoriya might have been watching him through. He wondered how they'd deal with each other in the future. It was hard to think about, both because of how difficult the question was and because now wasn't the time. All for One shook his head as he looked back at the exchange of blows between All Might and Shimura. Shimura and All Might were both getting worse but at very different rates. All Might's was controlled but fast while Shimura was a slow slide into ruin, just as planned. Thank you, Kurogiri. I'll talk to you once this is over. I'm sure hell, I might be talking to you right now. The thought made him chuckle. Indeed you are, sir. Good luck. Disabling comms now. The connection broke off now, since letting it run too long might give away important details. It definitely couldn't be tapped in time, but it might give away the location of the League, a problem in itself. All for One shook his head. All of the problems were sorting themselves out, and now, it looked like his last problems were about to follow suit. All for One was never one for trust though and began to charge one more attack, pointing his arm forward just in case. The high-speed chase had entirely come to a close as they evaluated each other. All Might wasn't even sure if Shimura could talk anymore, but since she could laugh it was probably possible. He couldn't get a word out of her though, so there they were, silently staring each other down. All Might had 10 to 8 hits left, and this limitation was really helping him see the benefit of this kind of fighting style. While his body couldn't go full speed anymore, he could still plan ahead and then act. Shimura would then act, and if he correctly guessed what she was going to do, he'd counter and win. His own speed became irrelevant when he knew what was coming. He usually had to use his reflexes to avoid danger the second he saw it, but with this style, he could react before he saw the danger. There were just two problems with this fighting style. 1. It relied on him guessing what the opponent was doing, which was a gambit. 2. All Might was really bad at it. Shimura stopped standing around and started to move around him to get a better angle, showing off the benefits of being able to use your full body with your quirk, but All Might was starting to get used to her style. It was like she had gotten slower as the fight dragged on. He could start to react and predict what she was going to do. However, this latest attack showed him that it was only like she had gotten slower. Shimura circled him before diving in, forcing him to stumble forward to narrowly dodge before she stepped in, intending to go at him with a barrage of punches, which was a barrage of problems for the already wounded hero. If he got sucked into an exchange like that, it would use the last of his energy. All Might sacrificed another usage of One for All to jump backward, mimicking All for One's evasive steps to build distance, but Shimura just kept following him. This really showed why All for One used this style, and why the current All Might was so bad at it. All for One could retreat as much as he liked because he could maintain his high speed for a long time and punish anyone who tried to chase him. Meanwhile, All Might could barely dodge one attack at a time, let alone punish anyone chasing him. Shimura was prepared to overtake him as All Might stopped his retreat and braced on the ground, gritting his teeth as he accepted the exchange of punches. He couldn't get out of it, so he'd have to double down into it.